Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the first Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this municipal year. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the Council House. Please can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it's switched off when you're not using it, and that your mobile devices are turned to silent. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Warspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. So yeah, and a welcome from me, especially to people who haven't been on this committee before. I think it's quite an open, transparent committee, and we really encourage, rather than just lots and lots of slides, really encourage questioning, conversation and really good discussion so we can have some good, robust recommendations that can come out of the committee. So the first item on the agenda is to note the appointments of the Chair and Vice Chair for the municipal year 2022-2023. So we note that. And then we move on to apologies. So Jake, can you tell us a bit about apologies, please?
Yeah, so had apologies from Councillor Allen, Councillor Tippett's is substituting, and Councillor Deacon has provided apologies as well.
Welcome, Councillor Tippett. Thank you for standing in. Declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest in respect of any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Harrison?
Okay, I've worked for an organisation that's provided courses for Kickstart entrance.
And I would declare that I am a Governor of Horizon Matt. Thank you. Councillor Tippett?
I don't know how relevant this one is, but I'm a student at the University of Plymouth, so if HE comes up, then I'm a student.
Thank you.
And just for consistency, then I work and employ at City College Plymouth as well. So.
Thank you. Councillor Hume.
Oh, is it? Can you hear me? I'm a Governor at All Saints. And does
Partridge.
And I'm a Governor at No Primary.
Thank you. Okay, lovely. And we can move on to the minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of February. I've agreed the minutes. Do we need somebody to second them? Could somebody second them? Or somebody who was here? I'm looking at you, Councillor Creswell. You would second them? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Elliot. Hopefully you've all had a look through this. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to raise on the terms of reference. We're happy with them as they stand.
Chair, I haven't got a pack. Would it have been sent to me on email?
Yeah, it should have been sent to you on email. Have you got your laptop with you? Would it be possible to get Councillor Hume a paper version? Would you rather have a printed version?
Please, Chair.
Yeah, is that something that can be done, Jake? Thank you. So nobody has anything to raise or discuss on the terms of reference, so we'll note those that they're unchanged and we'll carry on with those for the next 12 months. So now we're going to hand over to Caroline Marr, who is Senior Policy Advisor, who is going to talk us through the Education and Children's Social Care Policy Brief. Thanks very much for joining us, Caroline. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. So as you can see from your pack, we produced the policy brief for each of these scrutiny meetings that just picks up on some of the key announcements or legislation changes from government since the last scrutiny. As you can see, there are a number of consultations that have happened recently. We have noted where we have responded to some of those consultations, and some consultations we're still awaiting the outcome. So that's always at the front end of this policy brief, just for your information, and so that you can see what activity is happening. The announcements themselves, we've picked up on all the relevant announcements. We have also, in bold, under those announcements, tried to provide you with the information about how that announcement, what that policy change from government, how that's being implemented in Plymouth, whether we've bid for the funding, whether we're implementing any policy change. Hopefully the committee will find that that's really helpful to bring them up to speed with that. I just wanted to today, obviously since the publication of this, there has been some further announcements, but what I wanted to do today was just really quickly, I thought it'd be useful, and if you'd want me to, was just to run through the fact that obviously since the last committee back in February, we've had the schools white paper has been published, and we've also had the Queen's speech where the schools bill was announced. So I just thought it'd be really helpful to do it really quickly, just to let you know the process that's going through at the moment, and the fact that it's still early days, but just to bring you up to speed. So the school's white paper, and as you know, the white papers are the policy statements or policy documents that government publish that set out their proposals for future legislation and policy change. And the white paper was called "The Opportunity for All: Strong Schools with Great Teachers for Your Child." And really, that was around delivering the levelling up agenda for the Conservative government, and it came out with a number of themes with lots of information. It's quite a big, lengthy document, as you might have already seen. And the main themes were around raising attainment standards, longer school days, regulatory approach, so how Ofsted works, curriculum and supporting best practice in schools and between schools. There was a theme around teaching and some measures set out around teaching, attendance and behaviour, supporting children and young people's mental health, education investment areas. As you know, Plymouth is one of the 55 education investment areas, SEND and children's social care, supporting families, and also then higher education. So that was announced back in March. Since then, obviously in May, on the 10th of May, we had the Queen's speech, which then went on to set out some of the legislation to support the white paper. And on the 30th, that's still going through the committee stage. So we're still really early doors. It's still in the House of Lords. So, and they've been having some debate. So on the 13th of June, they had a second day of debate on some proposed amendments. But the main purpose of the bill is around the supportive legislation for the white paper. So that's strengthening the regulatory framework for academy trusts. So we know that there's the proposal that they want to enforce the legislation around all schools becoming MATs, joining a strong academy trust by 2030. So that's something that's been in the media and we've known about, and they've released some guidance around that as well. Supporting more schools to become academies and strong trusts, which I've just said, enabling better and more targeted, more consistent multi-agency support for children and families. So that's picking up on the SEND and the children's social care, but also that's looking at addressing the attendance. They wanted to, through the legislation, requiring schools to publish an attendance policy, and also establishing a children not in school register. So that would then place a duty on the local authority to provide some support to families who are educating their children at home. There's also the implementation of the national funding formula, so that each mainstream school will be allocated funding on the same basis. We know that that's something that's just coming in, and it should be a fairer system. Legislation around improving safeguarding, and also strengthening the current teacher misconduct regime. and powers around teachers. So so this is still at the committee stage. And then yesterday, just to let you know as well, the DFE have published a list of 15 policy statements to explain the measures that I've just discussed that were set out in that school's bill. So I've not had a chance to look at them all yet, but there's quite a lot of information that's coming out at the moment, but it's still very early days. And obviously, as a policy team with Ming, we will be keeping an eye on how that legislation moves through Parliament, and we can come back. But the other offer was about whether the committee would appreciate a bit of a summary with a little bit more information, or whether you felt that was needed. I'd be quite happy to produce a briefing for everybody if that would be helpful.
I think that would be very helpful. I mean, is that what we think we ought to have on the agenda for the next meeting then, when you do your, or do we think we need it before that? What sort of timescale are you talking?
So because it is such early days, there's such a lot of information coming out from government at the moment. And obviously the bill none of it's set out in legislation formally yet. So we're still in a bit of a process. So I thought, in terms of just so that it was a bit of a summary for people to know what's included in the white paper, but also then setting out in the legislation, which might then help going forward for you to identify the areas that you might want more detail on in your work program. We could put into the work program for future, and we can more specific items instead of the whole the whole white paper, because there's just lots in there.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Councillor Chris.
I think it might also be useful as well to sort of meld as well. I know it's still a green paper and it's out to consultation until the 22nd of July, but I think the send green paper also as well, because there is so much that cross-references between the white paper and the green paper. And the other thing that I think is really important for us as a local authority is that is the strengthened role for local authorities, which is in the white paper, which is specifically relevant and something that we need to be really clear about of what the implications are for local authorities.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Partridge, did you put your hand up?
Is it possible to have it's consultation runs to the 17th of July. Is it possible to have a full briefing in 2 months' time, when a lot of this backwards and forwards has been sorted out by Parliament and the officers up in Parliament? That way we could get a full grasp of what they're trying to send down from London. Thank you.
I was thinking maybe, Caroline, if you were happy to send us a brief, the summary in the meantime, and then we have it as an agenda item at our next meeting to discuss about which bits of it we might want to end up on the work programme, if people agree to that. Yeah? Ming, did you want to come in? Or you've just appeared?
Yeah, I just about to say that what you suggested. I think, yeah, I don't have anything further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, do you want to carry on, Caroline?
Well, no, that was it from me, unless there's any questions in terms of the content of the announcements that were on the actual policy brief itself.
I'm sure there are. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Caroline. Thanks very much for that. Okay, questions for Caroline then, please. Yeah. Dylan?
Hi, thank you, Caroline, for that. I'm just wondering, on the SEND review, it says here that the council will be responding to the consultation, and I'm conscious that the consultation closes before the next scrutiny, so I can't send these questions with the usual councillor. Some of the concerns around particularly outsourced private therapy, will there be an update on how much money is actually currently being spent in Plymouth on outsourcing private therapy to meet EHCP requirements? And also on that one, what portion of the budget is going towards early years provision in the SEND review?
Who wants to take that? Is that something?
I was going to say, yeah, that's probably not the level of detail that I would be able to respond to.
Ming, do you want to come in here?
I think, Chair. I think we can come back with more data. I can't get the data out of my head at this stage. Yeah.
Okay, so you come back to us with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Have you got a supplementary, Dylan?
No supplementary, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Creswell?
I've got a couple of things. The first one I wanted to ask, which is a fairly kind of brief one, is the reference towards to school attendance, improving consistency of support. I actually assume that all schools are required to publish an attendance policy. But I just wondered, where it says bringing rules for granting leave of absence to academies in line with other state-funded schools, do we know what the situation is at the moment within the city in terms of, do we have that data about our own schools already? Because it might be something that we already actually have. We might be ahead of the game here.
Chair, do you want me to answer that
please.
question? Yeah. As a local area, we are very proactive. When Children's Commissioner want to gather evidence, ask around the country which local authority want to take part in evidence gathering and to make suggestion. We are one of the 10 local authority took part in Children's Commissioner's survey. Children's Commissioner was asked by DFE to do the attendance work to inform the policy we're talking about. So we are one of 10 authorities contributing to this. That very matter you just raised, that make sure academy have the same policy, the same holiday authorization process, same as the local authority. We also propose that as well. We are part of that process. And also, when DFE carry out the attendance project, again, gather evidence how to improve attendance, we volunteer ourselves. So we took part in the two, one the DFE themselves attendance project, and other children commissioners surveys. So we are active part in contributing to this national initiative. Because of that, we do have a good understanding of what's going on in the city. To answer your question, Councillor Creswell, and we know, I think at the city, in general, we have an overall coordinated approach, but we do have a different MAT to have their own attendance teams, they do have their own approaches. That's why our suggestion to the DFE, we need to have a national coordinated standard approach, procedure, and a core offer internal attendance.
Thank you, Ming. Do you want to ask something? Put your...
Don't have a supplementary, but I have another question to ask on one of the on one of the briefings.
Thanks, Chair. As a Governor All Saints Academy, we do a attendance record anyway on the report, so it's there for everyone to see. So you know, if someone wants to ask, then there is a report anyway. We do that kind of every year. Right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. I wanted to ask, did you want to ask something on a different bit of the policy brief? Oh yeah, I want to ask something and then I'll come back to you.
Right.
About, I just wanted to ask Ming about the national tutoring programme. I know that there's feedback pending from how it's worked in Plymouth, but can you just give us a brief kind of overview of how it's worked in Plymouth, and most importantly for me really, how we're going to, as a committee, I think it would be good for us to have an item on it in a forthcoming scrutiny around what impact it's had and if it's managed to close any identified gaps for our pupil premium children and young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think as I explained in the handout committee report, we do have a close contact with the particularly Manhattan School in terms of they use our national tuition program. We have confidence that maintain school. They try the best what resource they have. When they use national program, they do have good mechanisms to check individual people's progress. And when they cannot use national tutoring program well, they use their own resources. They putting extra support within the resources. Some school recruit actual teacher, retired head teacher, the teacher at the moment not working in school to support them. But what we don't get a full picture is our academy, because there's no, it's not a mandatory requirement for academy to give local authority those information. Since last month, we have sent out to request for all schools to give us information, not just maintain school, academy as well. We already gathered some schools' feedback, but not to the level that will give us confidence to generate a sort of opinion how it's going in among academy school in a multi-academy trust. So we are still tracing school to get a feedback to us about the use of national tutoring program. So that's where we are. We have better understanding of maintain school, but we don't have full picture of academy.
Is it a request you can reiterate with the, I don't know, the force of the Scrutiny Committee asking that they would like to see it too, if you could reissue that request? Because
Yeah,
it would be good to have a picture of how it's impacted in the city.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, obviously, you know, for our maintained schools, that's easy enough to see and look at, but actually a whole city picture as far as you can manage, with a little bit, maybe a little bit of from it coming from this committee to encourage some of our trusts to share that data. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I will mention that this has been highlighted a priority for local community and local elected member. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
would say that.
Before I go to Sally, Elliot, somebody from outside has messaged me to say that the volume is very low. They're finding it hard to watch online. They can't hear very well. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that. Ah, okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor Criswell.
It's coming back to a theme of data as well. One of my main pet interests is looking at the issue on raising behaviour in school guidance, suspension and permanent exclusion guidance. And of course, there's a big theme of behaviour in the white paper. There's been a big theme of behaviour right the way through with this government. I'm, as a ex-teacher, you know, behaviour is important. Behaviour is very important because it's behaviour we want to have good behaviour, because we want to have enhanced learning behaviours, and learning behaviours will raise standards. What I actually wanted to ask particularly, though, is that some of this evidence here about the raising behaviour in schools is based on the, first of all, on the Timpson review, which was in May 2019, which of course was post-COVID, and there's been quite a change, pre-COVID I should say, and post-COVID, there has been quite a change and an impact on schools, especially if you speak to teachers anecdotally as well, of children having to adjust to coming back into school again. And the other thing I wanted to ask as well, specifically, is what sort of data we have or plans to collect data from schools so that we can actually see, I'll say exclusions, but actually so we can see how inclusive our schools actually are, because in reality, it's in order to be able to carry out some of the things that are going to be expected within the white paper, we are going to need to have a very good picture of our schools and to know which schools are perhaps more inclusive, which schools perhaps are more likely to perhaps off-roll or more likely to exclude pupils. So I just wondered if there's any moves being made on collecting that sort of data. Thank you.
Want me to? Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank Councillor Criswell. Yeah, that is exactly what is spot on. That's one of the priority for our inclusion program, which we are developing. There are 4 strands. One strand is inclusion, management, information, and intelligence, which have been well developed. as you said that, as a city, we cannot afford just wait for the DFE to publish 2 years ago's data, last year's data. We want to collect live data, most recent data. One of the difficulty we have overcome, just overcome actually, to make sure all city schools, doesn't matter what governance arrangement they have, signed up to a data sharing agreement so they can feed the data into one place, local authority in this case, so we can analyze and we can develop a inclusion scorecard with that, which is really in shape already. All Matt CEO now signed up to let data sharing, which was a big blocker in the past. Some, if you just need one big mat, refuse to sign up because they are not, they don't have to sign up. Yeah, put it that way. But in the spirit of well-developed partnership, they all signed up. I hope next time we can share some inclusion information with this group next time. Yeah, it is a priority area of work and well-developed. We are reaching the final stage of it, of having a scorecard.
Thank you, Ming. So I think maybe we'll put that as an item for the work programme. Yeah. Do you want to ask anything else?
I was just going to say that seems to be a very sort of positive move, and we seem to be ahead of the game. And we really, if there's going to be this increased responsibility for local authorities, having accurate data of your schools is absolutely key.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Loveridge, did you put your hand up? Yeah, sorry, I think that was before Tom.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
It's just a quick question, just to ask, is the council going to be fining parents if their children don't have 100% attendance in schools? It's just something I would like to know, please, Ming. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, may I answer that question? I assume I should answer that question. Yeah. Yes. It's not about just not 100%. It's about in what circumstances, also absence being authorized by school or not. Obviously, we cannot issue a penalty notice if a child's absences has been authorized by school, even they attend 80%, 90%. But if the absences have all been authorized by school, that means school agree to the absences, and there is no legal ground to issue penalty notice. Penalty notice would be issued where the school give reasonable leave, agreed by school, and the parents still go away, let the children to go away in excess of what school agreed to them. So we do have a clear procedure in place to issue penalty notice, which has been disrupted during the pandemic. Now we're resuming this area of work. There is a clear protocol, that's a legal requirement for each local authority to have a local penalty notice protocol that need to be agreed by police as well, interestingly, but we do have a clear procedure.
Okay. No supplementary. Can I just ask one more question, Chair? And it's about home education. Ming, I know that was quite high, to be honest with you. What's the data on that? Is that come down, home education, or is it still quite high at the moment?
Yeah, it's still quite high. It's a kind of 1 month up, 1 month down. That's kind of the what we did in the home education. Last year, we carried out home education review on the backdrop of let's say national rise elective home education, the Plymouth part of that trend. Our concern is not just about the number being raised. Our attention is very much on within this elective home education cohort, who they are. Are they the people who are suitable to be home educated or not? Are they already known to social worker or not? Are they already the one who have EHCP or not? So our focus is in identified the cohorts who possibly from the first place, the home environment is not suitable for home education. So because of that review, we now have developed a multi-agency protocol, which will be signed up in our local safeguarding board subgroup on the 7th of July, the ultimate head on 7th of July. When I set up multi-agency work, because we want to intervene early if we find the children whose circumstances clearly tell us possibly their home education is not suitable. And then we will intervene early. This is a little bit difficult situation at the moment. Current legislation have not really set it black and white, home education is allowed or not. And you do have some political campaign to say that they want to promote citizens' right in terms of where they should educate their children. And then we do have child welfare professional practitioners concerned about children being educated at home. So we want to strike that balance to make sure the one who have a capacity, who parent with a very good reason, and their children can be educated at home. We don't have any reason to intervene to stop that. But the one who are not suitable, we want to reduce it. That's what the new multi-agency protocol will require, multi-agency information sharing in order for us to identify any unsuitable elective home education as early as possible stage. And then if we identify it early or you identify later stage, if parents still want to educate the children at home, we do have legal power to issue school attendance order. We do issue school attendance order now and then. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, yeah.
Are you finished, or?
Yes, I finished. Yeah.
Councillor Leveridge, you happy with that? Quick questions then, please. Councillor Brasdell.
I'll make this very brief. I just want to come back briefly to Councillor Cresswell's comment around inclusivity of exclusions. One of my experiences as a former teacher was the differing arguments around exclusions, and I'll be interested to see the outcomes of the Timpson Review guidelines, because one of the things that I noticed in Plymouth schools is that some schools had different approaches in terms of making sure that families from more diverse backgrounds, to what extent, particularly ones that didn't have English as a first language, understood options that those families had in terms of appeals and next steps. And I'll be interested to see in terms of the fairness side of the outcomes of that, to what extent the council has a role to make sure that families from different backgrounds, particularly in schools that aren't as diverse as others, fully understand the ramifications of what an exclusion might mean. So perhaps that's something we can come back to in the future when the guidelines come out of this particular review. Thank you.
Thank you. Dylan?
I wanted to go back to the school attendance and improving consistency of support. I was wondering if there'd be any analysis and support for pupils whose attendance would be lower because of long COVID complications, and whether that's something that's been considered in the Plymouth response.
Yes, it is one of the biggest factors in terms of what has happened in the past 4 years and what are we going to do in the next few years. We're talking about 3 years, 5 years in terms of that. One of the impact of pandemic is children's mental health. While we have put together a very robust mental health for school return program, mental health for staff as well, school staff, to support children's learning, that include attending school, that including behavioral learning that Councillor Cresswell just mentioned. And we do, to answer your question, we do factor this mental health impact and other impact of pandemic on the attendance.
Okay. Come back.
Yeah, can I follow up with a supplementary? I was more specifically looking at pupils suffering with long COVID. So it's no secret that there are children who have had COVID who have then having other health complications who might not be able to attend school, and how this would be impacted on making sure that all schools are consistently supporting children with their attendance and also that they're not missing learning.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the service, my service at the moment, we're developing a next phase of work, because as Caroline's policy just said, the government issue new attendance guidance. They want local authority and the school to work together to develop who provide the core service, what school expected to do, like expectation, the standard. And we, in order to do that, we gather evidence, exactly the data, children suffer from other illness, and long-term COVID, etc., how we can support them. And then we will have a advice provided to school. And then the expectation is local authority officer will need to have a regular consultation with the school to make sure all schools have the same approach. That's a piece of work in progress.
Thank you, Ming. I'm thinking that maybe, again, we could look at having something on the work programme about long COVID, not just for students actually, but for staff, school staff as well. So I think that's something maybe we might want to look at in a future meeting. Thank you, Dylan. So Natalie and then Councillor Hume.
Thank you. My question is regarding Ukrainian pupils, Ukrainian children coming to our schools. Obviously, I see in May we had 9 children that were attending Plymouth schools. Are all of the children who have come from Ukraine now being allocated places and in school, or are some still due to start school and have not yet started? And are there any changes from that May data?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my latest information indicates the answer yes. All people have been placed in school, and they are well supported. Local authority do have a small team, a couple of people to support people from abroad, people ethnic minority supporting. We are fortunate we still have a team. We keep the while most local authority already don't have that team, so they to provide school advice and support, make sure those children who arrive be placed immediately. And the school is, I have to say, credit to school. Even before those children arrive, I have so many school head teachers wrote to me to say, if any Ukrainian people arrived, ask them to come to my school. That's really, really impressive that how caring the head teacher they are in the city.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you, Ming. Over to Eugene. You want to come in?
Yeah, just a very little bit of context in terms of the numbers that we're talking about. We've got 110 individuals. There are, within that whole group of Ukrainians, that's not just children, that's adults as well. 20 of those 110 are individuals, the rest are family groups. There are 35 family groups. 37 children are under the age of 18. 30 of those 37 are under 16. I'm not absolutely sure about the under 5 age range, so we can get some more detailed information to really offer, confirming assurance that all of those children are placed. But my understanding is exactly as Ming has outlined, that all of those children are in schools. We are expecting more families, and we have got ample host families to support the families coming in.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. I can only speak as a governor for the trust that I'm a governor for, but they have got the data for what students do in their subjects, the attendance record of the teachers, the amount of pupils that are expelled, if that makes sense. So I can't say if they share that data with, the powers that be, but, as a governor, we get told that, as I said earlier, kind of on our kind of annual reports every year. So the data is there within the trust of the 3 schools that I'm a member of as a governor. So it is there. I just don't know if they're allowed to share it, if that makes sense.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's not a question of the data not existing. It's getting it from the trusts to the local authority and the willingness or the ease of doing that. But
Yeah.
I think it's getting better. It'd be fair to say, Ming, isn't it? But yeah, there's work to do on that relationship.
Thanks.
Do you want? You have to. Yeah, you have to be quick.
Just a quick one, Jean, on the back of what Councillor Harrison said about the Ukraine children, obviously their mental health, what do we do when they're in school to keep an eye on their mental health? Because they've been through enough. So that's massive for them, that transition.
So that's something that we're keeping a close eye on. So when families have arrived, there's a whole series of supports offered and signposting offered in terms of what they might need. And my service has visited all of those families and host families as well, in order to ensure that they know what is available, both in terms of early help support services as well as statutory services that can provide either mental health or children and family support. So we're still growing a picture of that need, but we have made sure that everybody knows what there is available, and we will be revisiting in order to keep a contact with families to make sure that we do respond to needs that they have, wherever that might need to be met within the wider system.
Sorry, just to follow on from what Jean said as well, is we are keeping Ukrainian families in connection with each other. There's Facebook groups as well, because this isn't about them leaving behind their culture. This is about encouraging the culture, encouraging the communities as well, so that they can all help support each other. I'm just going to be hopeful. Okay.
Thank you. I think we're going to move on from this item now. But thank you very much for all the questions and discussion. I think we've got a good few things, at least for the work programme from here as well. Thank you very much, Caroline. I think you've got somewhere to get to, so I hope you get there. Yeah, thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to item 8, which we think is quite helpful at the start of the municipal year to have an overview of children's social care and education participation and skills service. So we're going to start with Jean, who's Service Director for Children and Young People and Family Service. No. Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't say that there. Councillor Carlisle, and I should formally welcome you to this committee because this is the first time you've been before us. So I will hand over to you, and then you can hand over to Jean. I think we'll be after you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to take this quick moment to introduce myself as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Councillor Charlotte Carlisle. I'm the Cabinet Member for Education, Skills, Children and Young People. This is my very first scrutiny ever, and I look forward to very robust scrutiny examinations along the way. And I want us to all work in partnership and to make that cohesive, we need to make sure that we all work together to strengthen my portfolio, but more importantly, the main aim is to strengthen our education and our children and the support that we offer them in Plymouth. I welcome everyone to contribute to the work programme as well. And so we have a robust scrutiny panel meeting each time, and we work towards gaining satisfactory results, because there's nothing none of us like more than the talking, but actually nothing happening, which is a good thing. Saying that, today, on occasion, I may stumble. It's my very first time. If I have to reach out to my officers and their wisdom, I will do so. If you want something direct from me and I don't know the answer, I will go off, get the research and come back to you with a written response as soon as possible. I'd also like it to be noted, Chair, that this is Alison Botham's last week with us. So she's off to have a very well-deserved retirement. I haven't had the pleasure of working with her very long, but if the way her staff talk about her, they are very large shoes to fill. So I'd like to say good luck to Alison formally on her well-deserved retirement. And also welcome Sharon Muldoon, who will be stepping into those shoes very soon from next week onwards. You're here today observing as well, so I welcome you to the team and look forward to working with you.
Can I just say something there, Councillor Carlisle? I have my little speech about Alison at the end, so I haven't forgotten.
Sorry,
but
I didn't
was
want
going to. No, that's fine. But I was going to talk about it at the end, and yes, obviously, welcome, Sharon.
So on to item 8, the overview of children's social care and education. This presentation provides Scrutiny Committee members with an introduction to both education, participation and skills, and children, young people and family services. This is designed to introduce new members attending scrutiny and a refresher for experienced members to the strategic vision and structure of each services, as well as key partnership arrangements and issues. Ming and Jean will take you through this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So over to you, Jean.
Thank you. Alison Boffin was due to join us this afternoon, but unfortunately isn't able to be here. So I will start the presentation. Ming has put that up on screen for us, but it is also in the pack. So to follow as you wish. We won't read through every slide, you'll be pleased to know, but we will just highlight key issues on each so that we can have plenty of time for discussion. Chair, apologies, Chair. Councillor Cresswell wants to come in.
Could I just ask, is it easier to actually come back to things at the end of the presentation or as you go?
Can I suggest at the end, is that okay, so that we can finish and go through a reasonable pace so that you're not just listening to long PowerPoint presentation. So as Councillor Carlisle said, this is very much an introduction. So this slide pack does cover quite a lot of territory and there is a lot of detail that sits underneath this. And we feel it is helpful to present an overview so that if there are particular issues that would benefit from further scrutiny, we can agenda those at future meetings if that's helpful, or provide further information outside or documents related to the issues we cover. So we're really open to that. The first few slides relate to and just locate us in terms of the role and function of the DCS role. So that's the Director of Children's Services role. And that's the role that Alison Boffin has been in and that Sharon joins us from the end of this week. So just wanted to set that in context, won't read that through, but I think it says quite clearly what the statutory duties are and of the lead member for children as well, to locate that. And then the next slide takes us on to the strategic vision that we adhere to as a whole partnership in the city. So this isn't just the children's services vision, this is the vision for all of the partnership. It's called A Bright Future, was published last year in 2021. If colleagues do want a copy of that vision, we're very happy to circulate that if you've not found that. If you navigate the Plymouth Children's Safeguarding Partnership website, it is available there, but we can share that specifically. And what you will see is that A Bright Future for Children is a strengths-based, partnership-wide strategy that focuses our attention on key areas of children's development and progress. The Safeguarding Partnership is focused on so safeguarding and keeping children safe, but we also work with our education and other colleagues to think about how children achieve and aspire, and also to ensure that they are healthy and happy. So under those three very broad priorities, we have a strategic plan and there is a significant governance arrangement to support that. And most recently, we have developed a strategic systems leadership board that brings together all of the various governance groups that are responsible for those three priorities. So strategic leads across the city meet on a quarterly basis to ensure that our plans and our outcomes are joined up across those three priority areas. Again, happy for us to talk about that some more if it's helpful. So I'm going to hand over at this point to Ming, who's going to say some things about education, participation and skills. Ming, you're on mute.
Can't hear you, Ming.
Same time I try to talk. Can you hear me now?
That's better, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I'm going to take you through to what we do in EPS and what are the key national and local drivers for our work. We just discussed about school white paper and that lead to the education bill, school bill, which we will keep an eye on. We also talk about SCA, AP green paper. I would like to say that I think just now I mentioned that we are doing this inclusion transformation program. A lot of things SEND and AP green paper talking about is quite in line with what we have already set out to do. It's about getting children right support, right place at the right time, and intervening at the early possible stage, and to empower mainstream school to provide the support within their capacity. And also there's a skill for the education white paper in promoting lifelong learning and the opportunity, and link the opportunity for growth. As you know, skill for the education is also a part of my area of responsibility. Another thing, member, I'm sure are already aware of, nationally, there's a dramatic rise in demand, not only in social care, also at SEND, demand for assessment, EHCP assessment, demand for specialist places. All those who have impact on how we conduct our business, how we continue to maintain a good service for school and children and young people. So education landscape changing. Yeah, the link to white paper. Even before white paper, we do have more maintained school become academy and join academy trust. In the local area, we introduced a few multi-academy trust which are considered to be strong, have impact into the city. So the landscape change, if you compare with 8 years ago, 10 years ago, there are multi-academy trust playing a bigger role in comparison. In terms of our focus, I mean, because the landscape change, local authority cannot continue to do like the old ways of deliver service, try to do everything for school, have a math improvement teacher, English improvement teacher. Our focus is more about system, focus on our children, our young people. We are become champion our children, our residents. So whatever the governance, school governance is, we are talking about our children attending a school. We want every school to be a good, outstanding school. We want every child to attend a good, outstanding school. On that point, we work together with the Department of Education, ISC, which just changed the name to Regional Director's Office. We work with the multi-academy trust. So you heard our place-based program, different phase partnership that have been evolved really well in past 1 year or so. Yeah. In terms of our outcomes, as you may have heard in the past, I think we are very concerned as a city about secondary schools outcomes. While we are still focusing on improving secondary schools outcomes, we do not forget early years, primary school, and post-16. So we want to improve the outcome across phases. So in the past years, we have increased our good outstanding school from 72% until last month about 78%. The first quarter was 76%. It's on the right trajectory, but not good enough because nationally, average good outstanding school is about 86%. So we still have a long way to go, although we are improving. So improving outcomes really focus on having more good outstanding school. That's our approach. And then inclusion college member and the officer I just talked about. It's for everyone. We want to make sure every child belongs. Every children will have best start in life, whatever circumstances they were born into. Just one of the members just said that, you know, whether we have good support for people whose language is English not their first language, where indeed people were born into poverty, etc. So our focus on vulnerable learner, let's really focus on inclusion, our inclusion strategy have been realigned to in the past 1 year as well. Not the three, I don't want to go through too many focus and no focus. Those are three things we are really focusing on. And in terms of governance arrangement, as quickly, we had Plymouth Education Board that called PEP, PEB, used to be chaired by, it's still chaired by our Chief Executive, Tracy Lee. And then based on the feedback from the school, from my CEO, or reflecting on the national driver I just talked about, we reviewed this governance structure of local education development. So they bring in some material and bring in some place-based element into this governance board. Also link to the overall structure that Jim just alluded to, the children service governance structure. So as you can see that, it's a strong partnership between DFE and local authority. So the chair, this board, the chair joined by Tracy Lee, our CEO, and regional school commissioners, director. This name just changed in the past few months. They changed to be called regional director's office now. So not all local authorities have this. I've been asked by, I don't want to name other locals in Southwest, to share our experience setting up this government, robust government structure and function. And underneath that, I just mentioned it earlier, we do have different phases. In the past, very much we focus on secondary school because everyone worry about secondary school outcome. Now we move to sort of cross phase, start early years. It's very important. I just happen to be lead officer for child poverty as well. I work with a member on child poverty, quite rightly. Early year has been highlighted. So early year now have a board, then not just local authority officer. We have private provider. We have local health service. They are sitting in the board. We have primary special school. They want to make connection with early years and secondary school, while develop their plan how to make sure primary school and special school continue to improve. So there's a typo there I just spotted. Secondary school, as I said, they've always been our focus. Let's work started before my time, 2 or 3 years. It's been around for about 3 years, but it's been evolved. With local authority playing more sort of central role now, we don't just leave it to multi-academy trust, very much based on those are our children, our city's children. We do have invested interest in the progress, the outcomes. So we are in that secondary school structure board. They call place-based program board, and also have a delivery arm called Strategic Education Group, SEC. You may have heard about that. And then post-16, that's also important. We link it to the employment agenda, skill gap. So let's be chaired by sector, by employer, and currently chaired by Princess Yosh, senior manager, and our head of skill, is also helping facilitating and convening the partnership. As you may know, skill plant, which is corporate product of all stakeholders, have been developed. And now we want to reach out to all stakeholders to decide how we are going to approach implementation of the skill plan. And the other things is cross phases in not just primary, secondary school, or special school, like inclusion, SCND, early health, etc. They all need to come together, as members just alluded to earlier on. So I talked too much, I think. Yeah, probably I already talked about the new PEPs well, which is really, really cool. with the focus aim to improve educational outcome for all school, not just one particular phase, or not just particular geographical area. So to bring all the key part of school improvement system together, you may know that before this, we do have a very forum. You do have head teachers partnership, inclusion partnership, and what we did by having this system in place, we bring them all together. Everyone take part. Everyone contribution to make everyone shares the success that we are going to have, and we already have. I don't want that to do it line by line. And in terms of my service, I got an internal function. We have early year services that link to early years board and primary school and special school service. We have SEN service linked to primary and special schools service. We have a small school improvement service linked to secondary school improvement. We do have skill services. In terms of how we structure them, just quickly, I myself as survey director, education participation and skill. I do have two very able and creative head of service supporting me to deliver the service in the most effective way in a very, very challenging circumstances with raising demand. Let's quickly, I don't want to go through line by line. Head of service for access to education, that's the service responsible for school transport, for place planning to make sure as a city we have sufficient places in school. And in school needed any priority repair work, whatever, we look into that. And then also we provide transport for vulnerable children who are entitled to a transport to go to school. Someone have very complex need to have an adapted transport vehicle to take them to school. And also we have a service who sit in our service, but they are independent called PIA. They are parent information and system support. In some local authority, they may be called parent partnership, standardized service. They provide parent with the support independently with advice and information in terms of SEN and local offer. And then we have SEN services. Within the service, we also have disability social work team. Not all local authority have a disability social work team sitting in education, but in Plymouth we have that. We have educational psychologists. They are incredible, effective service, and they provide very good support for school. On top of the statutory service, when something like key and whatever happened, they are the people who are in school first to support pupil and staff. There's an increased demand in this service, as I mentioned earlier. The third group is the skill and post-16. There's my new boss, children service came with me to attend a presentation made by this team in terms of Youth Hub. You may heard our skill launch program, Youth Hub and other hub. The government minister visited us yesterday morning. I think what I took away is you were very impressed with what we do. And one of the challenge for us is need. We want to reduce the need while we're doing really well in terms of narrowing the skill gap, providing support for residents who need advice and support getting into employment, into education and training. And then we combined, I think this used to be two departments, we combined into one, head of education improvement and virtual school. We combined. Virtual school, as you know, is a statutory service It's not online learning platform. It's a virtual school to help look after children to achieve the maximum outcome in education through personal education plan, PEP, through regular monitoring, through partnership working with schools designated look after children leave. We member may be aware we have, as a corporate parent, we do have legal duty to make sure all the children look after achieve the best. And that's a virtual school. The other education improvement, I don't think I need to explain to you, is about education school standard, school improvement, school causing concern, etc. Actually, quickly, I think those things probably already mentioned in other forum. We make some improvement in terms of more setting and school become good or outstanding, but we want to achieve more. And also key stage 4, although it's a teacher assessment, this is the first time our outcome in terms of attainment 8 and basic English and math are slightly better than the national average, but we want to see this year's physical exam, what that will take us to. And then our skill, adult education was judged good. This was I improved from required improvement 2 years ago. It's good across the board. With some feature outstanding, we are very, very pleased with that. I just mentioned about one skill plan for the whole city, and inclusion transformation program makes make some progress. I think I should stop there just to see. Should take James,
Thank you, Ming.
your bit up.
So I will try to move at some pace to allow time for questions. So I'm the Service Director for Children, Young People and Family Service, and there's two parts to my service. One is the statutory social work side, and there's over 190 qualified staff in that group, qualified social workers and their managers, and also a targeted support service, which there are about 140 staff working at a level just below the statutory line in order to support children so that their risks or issues do not escalate to where we need to get involved at a statutory level, although many of those workers do work with families who are open to our statutory service. So it's a large service. And the structure is the last slide in the pack, and I won't talk about that in detail, but happy to answer questions. I wanted to start my short bit with two very key current national drivers that are around, and I'm sure everybody is aware, and that is the National Review into the murders of Arthur Labanye Hughes and Star Hobson, that has significant messages for every local authority across the country. And I wanted to set that out in terms of the 8 key areas in terms of recommendations that report makes, and I really would recommend it as something to read for colleagues. It sets out both children's lives and the issues that impacted at the point of their deaths. And there are lots of issues there that resonate for us in Plymouth, and we are working with the Safeguarding Partnership to think about how we learn from this review and implement, and that might be something that Scrutiny wants to hear about at some point in the future. And secondly, and published at the same time, was the independent review of children's social care, which is a bit more of a significant read. So 278 pages of incredibly valuable review by Josh McAllister and his team, undertaken in a really tight timescale, I would say, given the scope of what they've looked at. And there are 7 key areas that they are recommending that action needs to be taken. Again, some of those actions are very much nationally driven, and we await government's view about those. However, that doesn't stop us looking at each of the key areas, whether it's a revolution in family help right through to the 5 missions for care experienced young people, to make sure that we're doing what we can now and ensuring that we are fitting with what we believe is a really positive spirit of really early help, but decisive and just child protection and children in care services. So again, something that you may want us to come back and talk about in some detail. And then very quickly, so there's 2 slides that deal with the safeguarding partnership. I did mention that at the beginning of the things I've said, so I'm not going to dwell on those 2 slides. They outline the subgroups to that partnership group, and that is where the governance of safe and safeguarding happen in principle. There is another group that I wanted to talk about, though, and that's a couple of slides on, Ming. Sorry, I'm racing past quite quickly. There's also a corporate parenting group, so where the Plymouth Safeguarding Children's Partnership really focuses on child protection and safeguarding. The corporate parenting group is responsible for governance in respect of children in care and care experienced young people, and we have responsibilities on a legal basis up to the age of 25 for those young people. So that is where there's oversight and scrutiny, and Councillor Carlisle, as the Cabinet Member for Children, chairs that group. And that happens on a quarterly basis. The virtual school that Ming talked about there, they report into that governance group, as does the officers who are responsible for children in care and care leavers, and also other partners. So Bernardo's and the local authority have been running a long-term partnership to think about positive destinations for care experienced young people, and the work that we do there together is reported into that forum as well. So I'm naming lots of things because they might spark interests of issues you might want to explore further. As I say, the structure chart is there, and you will see that we are split into 4 main areas, although we currently have ambition to look at whether we need to separate out the front door. So if you look to the left of the diagram, there is all our referral and assessment services. So the first point of contact for families into our service also includes the targeted support service that I mentioned earlier, that level just below the statutory line. And we're looking at how we do that better, particularly in light of the independent review and that message about a revolution of family help, to help families as early as we possibly can so that risk doesn't escalate. And then you'll see that the journey of the child is they might come into our service, they might need a child in need plan or a child protection plan if risk is greater than the level of support at that lower level. And some children need to come into our care either temporarily or on a permanent basis. And we have teams that are specifically responsible for that. And then the 4th group is a group of colleagues who oversee child protection plans and children in care plans to make sure that we are supporting, responding to risk and caring for those children in the best way that we can. So they are colleagues called independent chairs and independent reviewing officers. And then my very last slide sets out some areas of strength and some areas for development. It's by no means all. It's really to give you a flavour of some of the issues that have been around and are around for us. So we have been responding to Kiam. There is a social work team linked to 12 schools close to Kiam. They've been in place since January, and they conclude their work at the end of the school holidays, so just beyond the first anniversary. And that was DFE funding that we sought alongside other services such as education, participation and skills. And that's been a really positive programme, actually, of supporting schools, supporting hundreds of families. And we're working with a whole range of partners to think about how to mark the anniversary this August. You'll see that there are a couple of other examples in terms of strengths and then a couple of examples in terms of areas of development. Our youth offending team did reach a good judgment last year. So for those colleagues who haven't seen that, there is a report that summarises what has been some significant progress in our response to young people who become known to the youth justice system, both in terms of formal orders that they might receive following criminal prosecution, and all of the preventative work that we're doing with hundreds of children to really stop the need for formal orders where we possibly can. The other positive is the Pause programme, and I think we have talked about this at Scrutiny historically, and this is the programme, it's a national programme that Plymouth is now looking to Community 3 of, and this is for women who've had more than one child removed through care proceedings. So really positive work to support women to improve their life outcomes, their life chances, in order that any future decisions about family are made in a position of strength where they can really make a difference, and we can support them to make a difference. And then the areas of development are our continued challenges about recruitment and retention, demand and capacity in our service, again, something we've talked about in the recent past here, as well as the placement sufficiency challenges that are affecting us locally, us as a region, and it's a national issue as included in Josh McAllister's report. We've done an awful lot of work to increase the types and range of placements for children who need to be looked after in the city. And again, that is something that we will bring forward with the updated placement sufficiency strategy, which is due to come back here for consideration. I think I'll stop there to allow time for questions.
Thank you. Excuse me, I've got horrendous hay fever today, so I'm just going to take a tablet. Okay, so who's got questions? Councillor Criswell.
I've actually got two questions, and I'll ask them both together if that's all right. The first question I wanted to ask is a very simple one. That gives a structure of the Plymouth Education Board, but who were the individuals who are actually on it? Is there a list of that? And the second question I wanted to ask or raise or make people aware of is very positive that the outcomes for Key Stage 4 attainment was now better than the national average, but I think people will be aware that Plymouth has consistently over many, many years, whatever administration there has been a performance at Key Stage 4 has been below national average. And although I'd say that's a very positive move, I think to actually think about the data in a much more considered way is to actually look for long-term trends, what's happened over the last sort of 3 years or whatever. Hopefully it'll continue on an upward trend. But I think the second thing I'd say to that as well is that the question arises that, of course, it was a different assessment method that was used in these Key Stage 4 GCSEs last year. And it was much more in the way of teacher assessment, reduced curriculum in some cases, which actually is in itself quite interesting. Not that standards actually lowered, but actually that perhaps an approach which was much more suitable for quite a lot of children, particularly perhaps some of our more vulnerable children, because it allowed them to actually show what they knew rather than what they didn't know. But coming back to the data, I really would like us to have a real good analysis of data as far as Key Stage 4 and all results are concerned.
Did you want to come back on any of that, Ming?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of data 3-year trend, as you already alluded to, like the Councillor Creswell, in the past 3 years, during pandemic, when no assessment, but the 3 years trend is in the past we always below national average. And you're right. This time assessment method was different. It was different. But the data, when you compare with the national average, is the like-for-like comparisons. So when we talk to the school lead, we are really encouraged. We want the school, this is the progress, but we always said this is just something we feel is the early days green shoot is positive, but we don't really want to say that is something actually we do not congratulate school leader on the different things. So I do pick up that that's a different assessment. So it is very important this year when we actually have physical exam, we want to report back earliest opportunity to member, to administration, what it happened. We switched back to physical exam. So probably that's the answer you're seeking, Councillor Cresswell.
Yes, I think pretty much. I suppose my interest is in actually the data and the data analysis, and I think we need to, as lay people, members and such, need to be able to understand that, so we can talk about it and know about it.
Yeah,
we'll
follow it up. Yeah,
I was going to say, when we got to the work programme around results and things, I don't know whether September would be too early to bring it to us. I don't know how it would work, but we could talk about that at the end of the work programme. Tom, you had a question?
Thank you. It's also worth noting that this year is a transitional year as well, so they're still altering exams. So even though it won't be teacher assessed, that still makes it harder to compare. And I believe that Ofqual have also specified that results this year will be higher than 2019, which again complicates a kind of like-by-like comparison. On a linked question, a lot of the work in the pack is around attainment at Key Stage 4. I was just wondering if the positive trend for Key Stage 4 outcomes is also mirrored in Progress 8?
we do not have Progress 8 data available. Yeah, we don't have that data.
Is there a specific reason for that? Is that not shared with the council, or is that just because it's not available to hand?
The DFE did not collect that data.
It's interesting. Thank you.
Councillor Cree?
I just had a question about the early years improvement work you're doing there. Have you, with the announcement that the government are going to consult on changing ratios, that's raised a lot of concerns in the community, both safety, safeguarding, but also with improving educational outcomes, particularly for our children in more deprived areas. I think that's going to have a fairly big impact. So is that being built into the plan going forward if the government does consult and does make that change? Thank you.
We have a regular conversation with Ofsted and DFE. I myself took part. This is a topic we do discuss with DFE. They are very keen actually seeking feedback as such. We did feedback to them about the concern local provider and local community have. We'll continue to do that. So let's channel communication there to influence the national policy and how locally we can implement those policies.
Thank you.
Viv, you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the national review into the murders and the review which was published in late May 2022, 8 national recommendations came out of that. I would like to know, perhaps not now, but we could put it into a work programme, what the council has done, have they, or the safeguarding board really, have they looked at these 8 national recommendations and taken them on board and improved any way, if there's a weakness anywhere in how we work? But I think that could go into the work programme, Chair. Thank you.
Can I just confirm the partnership met last week, and the report had literally been published, I think, a week before. We did consider it for the first time at that meeting last week, and we're very happy to provide a report in terms of update and progress. As I've said, we are looking at how we can implement what we can, review what we have been doing, so that we can offer some assurance wherever that's needed.
Just to supplement you, Chair, I do think one of the most important things we do on the council is the safeguarding issue, and it's really important that if anything happens to a child in our care or in our city, immediately the public, the press, whatever, will go for social services. And what we have to get over is it's the partnership, it's everybody, it's the doctors, it's the police, it's the schools, it's everyone who takes responsibility to look after our children. And that's what I'm hoping will come out in these recommendations.
Dylan, and then Natalie, and then I think we're going to have to move on because we're overrunning a little bit.
My question is about the recent achievements with the high percentage of early years provision graded good or outstanding. In terms of the targets, has that been focused on improving verbal communication to make sure that young people are able to focus on their literacy and numeracy targets in primary school?
Thank Councillor. May I answer, Chair?
Yes, absolutely, Ming, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, communication, speech, and language is our particular focus, particularly in Plymouth. This morning, I went to the parent partnership, and one of the parents told me, I think, about how she appreciates our focus on the communication, speech, and language. We do have a team to have the particular support in that area. It is one of the priority area for early years.
Fantastic. I don't need to ask myself, Laurencebury. Thank you.
Thank you. And then over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the social workers, and you said about the amount of social workers in the teams. I can see how many teams are there. Have we got the full complement of social workers that we should have, or are we reliant on agency social workers? Is one part of my question. And the second part is, obviously during COVID, we had an increase in children going into care and needing support. Is that levelling out now, or are we still above the number that we would usually see in care at the moment?
So in order, in terms of recruitment and retention, historically, Plymouth has not had high vacancy rates. However, the pandemic did change that, and we got caught up, as much as many local authorities did, in some turnover, in particular in relation to experienced staff. For us, that impacted us in particular teams. So it's our child protection teams, mostly, where we've felt the impact. And while a lot of social workers haven't left, some have, others have moved to other parts of the service. So there's been a mixture of things happening. However, we do have a higher rate of vacancies than we would like, and we are seeking to fill those permanently. The pipeline of experienced social workers applying for permanent roles is very slow, much slower than we would normally expect. However, other pipelines, such as newly qualified social workers, this is the time of year when we start to get those applications ready for late summer and early autumn starts, and we recruit to about 20 plus posts, so that we have that pipeline already progressing. We have agreed that we're going to look at some overseas recruitment, because we are looking at where we can add to our diversity, but also add to the experienced workforce. So that's a strand of work we're undertaking. In the meantime, we have had to use project teams, and we have had to use agency staff. We always have a certain number of agency staff, but that has been a really challenging space in the last year. We've had a project team called Innovate in since last August. They are due to leave us this August, and we are working through their exit plan in very fine detail so that they leave. But we do have other agency staff in other parts of the service. For example, in our permanent service, we have had an additional team agreed in order to grow capacity to respond with quality to children in our care. We haven't quite recruited to those posts on a permanent basis, and that's part of our challenge. So in the meantime, we've got agency staff in those posts supporting children in the meantime. Our ideal position is that we reduce that back down to the kind of levels that we were used to. 1 to 3% of staffing is not unusual in ordinary times, but we think that's going to take us some time to do. So we've got a number of streams of work, as I've described, in order to try to address those challenges. The second part of your question was about number of children in care. And since the beginning of the pandemic, the overall number has increased by about 60. By the end of the reporting year in March 2021, there were 485 children in our care. So that was 3 more than there were at the beginning of the pandemic. At the end of the financial year to 2022, and it is in some of the data we've provided today, that number was at 490. So we didn't continue to see a climb. It has plateaued, I would say, rather, but we have some work to do in order to look at that number of children in care, making sure that the right children come into our care, and if they need to, that we're looking at reunification with their immediate or extended family as soon as that's viable, but also working earlier with families so that we're preventing the need for children to become looked after. And there is a focused work stream at the moment in order for us to achieve those goals. We are extending the size of our adolescent support team. So that's a team that sits within my targeted support service, and they work preventatively with families, but they'll also undertake reunification work because that's detailed therapeutic supportive work, and we need to wrap support around families once we've made those decisions. So that combination of work with that grown resource, we are expecting over the next 2-3 years to reduce our numbers down to a level that fits with good England average data. And that would take us closer to 400 children looked after as opposed to the number that we have now. So speaking with you very candidly, that's our ambition, but we're not going to do that in a rush. We're going to do that carefully by supporting families in the right way. And as always, happy with any challenge or any opportunity to present how we're progressing with that work when that is deemed kind of helpful.
Thank you. I have a quick supplementary on that, sorry. You mentioned about getting overseas workers. So have we got thoughts about the possibility of using some of our recent Ukrainian visitors, shall we say, some of whom may have the skills able to support? So are we looking sort of internally, as opposed to just outside, but actually internally, if we've got new people coming into the area that might have those skills as well as social workers?
Apologies. So we are looking at qualified and experienced social workers. That is the route for that recruitment. And therefore, we are open to where those qualified social workers come from. We will be using a recruitment agency to support that work because the cultural, the legislative shift, the practical shift for those girls, we've learnt, and I've undertaken this work in other local authorities over a number of years, the quality of the support that you offer is crucial to the successful sustainability of those people coming. So you need to think about, are they ready? Are they of the right experience? And is there a fit in terms of what they bring for Plymouth? So I think all of that needs to be borne in mind, and therefore we're open, but we are going to work with specific countries in order to recruit. There are many local authorities doing this up and down the country, so this is not new, and it is cyclical. Local authorities will find themselves doing this periodically at different times when there are challenges in recruitment. So it's a well-trodden path. But in terms of your question specifically, if there are experienced social workers in that group and issues of trauma aren't impacting on them right now in a way that would impact on their ability to work with some of our own traumatised children, then of course we're open to those opportunities.
Thank you, Jean. You have to be really quick, Andrea.
Chair, I'm going to be quick. I've asked this question before, Jean. Just once again, I'd like to know, I looked after children. Are we successful in returning these children to their biological families eventually? You know,
not always. There are a proportion of children who need to remain in our care permanently, and they need to know that they're remaining in our care permanently in terms of safety and certainty, and them being able to settle, recover from trauma, and to achieve educationally in terms of their life chances. So there is a proportion of children who absolutely need that certainty. But there's equally a group of children who come into our care where they don't need to stay very long, so reunifying them home is absolutely right in that instance to their parents or their immediate family. And there are other children who will need more time because there will be issues for their parents that they've needed to resolve. And once they've resolved those, it's then about supporting reunification to happen in a meaningful and lasting way. So there are different groups of children needing different things. Our adolescent support team and our service in general has really shifted their thinking, very much looking at where is reunification possible. Coming into care doesn't mean you have to come into care forever. It can be a really useful period of time for children to have space, to recover, to support their parents, to make some changes. And so we need to be open to that. And I'd like to think that we're as open as we can be to those opportunities. And in the last 2 years, we have successfully reunified, and they're small numbers at the moment, but wanting them to grow. It's at least 12 each year in terms of long-term children who've been in our care long-term reunified, children going home after a shorter period of time, that the numbers are bigger than that, but I haven't got that data to share with you today.
Thank you, Jean. And before we move on to the next thing, the thing that always comes to my mind when we have these discussions is where the voice of the child sits in all of these services, but actually we're going to come on to that. The participation team will be in our youth service update. But I don't know, it might have occurred to other people about how the children that are involved in our services tell us what they think of what we're doing and how we're operating, but that is coming in a bit. So now, thank you very much for that. So now we're going to go over to David Northey, I think. Thank you, David, for being patient and waiting. I know we're a little bit later than you were probably expecting, but can I hand over to you now?
That's fine, Chair. I found that very interesting, so I hope the panel did as well. Through you then, you've got a very brief paper in the pack today, which basically gives you sort of 4 numbers, and I'll quite happily talk about those. I think the first thing to note is timing in life is everything, isn't it? We're in the middle of June now, so it would be really good if this meeting had maybe been next week or the week after. I could have brought you some data, real live data on the current financial year, but that's still in progress. So this is kind of looking back over our shoulder into last year, which seems a long time ago. And I think it's been brought to life in terms of what the finances are telling us by what Jean and Ming have already told you and some of the questions that you've been asking. But just very quickly, and then we can see where this takes us for a moment, you'll see that in terms of business as usual for last year, on a net budget of 53 million, the service came in with an overspend of 296,000, which I think, given all the noise around COVID and everything that was going on, that is a phenomenal result that we shouldn't look away from. So 296, and I can come back to that if you need to. I know what you're going to say, though. There's another little table there that says, but hang on, David, we spent 9.44 million on COVID cost. And then there's an explanation there about where those costs came from. But again, I can give you a little bit more detail there. Obviously, we all knew about the backlog within the courts and cases being heard. So that meant that there were additional costs. There's about $500,000 there. The placement costs that you've been talking to Jean about and the increase in the numbers came in just shy of 7 million. And some of that, of course, was not just children coming into care in 21-22. I've said this to committee before, and I'll say it wherever I am. The children that came into care because of COVID right from the start are still in the system somewhere. So there's still an ongoing cost. So that 7 million is basically 3.5 million of the children that came in the previous year and the children that came in last year. And then there's special assessment cost. And of course, and you've touched on it again, bringing in extra resource in terms of additional social workers to deal with the caseload. So when you add all that through, that means that we drew down from the COVID funding 9.44 million. So that's kind of looking over our shoulder into last year. I suppose what I want to get from you, Chair, and I'm certainly happy to bring whatever information you want, but maybe at the next meeting it'd be more useful if I set out the budget for 22-23 alongside wherever we are in the reporting cycle, so that it gives you the context. So, for instance, quite happy to say that one question might be, well, if we've got 7.4 million or 9.4 million of COVID spend during last year, what happens in 22-23? So part of answer to that one is we've built in growth for children coming into care of 7.6 million. So hopefully that sort of gives you some assurance that we are aware of the trend doesn't just stop. We can't just stop the process on the 1st of April because the funding stopped. I'll stop there, Chair, and if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
No, thank you, David. And I think that would be really good to bring it back to the next meeting with the budget for 22-23. And in my obvious question was going to be about the ongoing cost of children and young people who came into our care during COVID. I don't know what conversations are happening at DFE level around, you know, badging things still as a COVID cost and what further provision there might be. I mean, is there any possibility of more COVID money? Because these, you know, we know that we can identify certain children who have come into our care because of COVID, who, as you say, are still going to be a cost to the authority for, you know, quite a few years to come. I just wondered what the position was around the government's position on helping us, you know, not just Plymouth, obviously, it's a national issue, but what their position is on helping us with that.
Okay, well, I'll take that one first if you like. If we go back to the year that's just finished, 21-22, if you remember, the government's view was very much funding for local government took us through the first quarter, April, May, June, because there seemed to be some kind of indication that everything would be behind us by the time we got into the summer months. And of course, we know that didn't happen. But in terms of unring-fenced funding that could be used for hotspots, children, adults, or whatever we needed to do, that just stopped. So I'm not saying that all the funding for COVID stopped last year, but it changed into being very specific and very targeted. And we had to do lots of returns to explain what we were spending it on. So that general feeling of during the first year and last year of actually getting unring fence grant coming into the system certainly dried up. So going forward, no grant came in for 22-23 badged as COVID at all. It's very much business as usual now, Chair.
Okay, so yeah, that's all the more reason for it to come to us with your plan for tackling it going forward. Does anybody else have any questions for David? No? Oh, Sally?
Just an observation to say that David's very good at giving us these briefings. He did a very good briefing for other members in December when it was working up towards the budget. So I really welcome him giving a briefing at the next meeting or whenever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So we don't have any further questions there. You've saved us a bit of time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for waiting for us. All right,
Bye.
thank
That's
you.
right.
And now we are on to item 10. So, no, hang on. Yes, it is item 10, isn't it? Yes, Scrutiny Performance Report. And Councillor Carlisle, you're going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. So this regular report for Scrutiny Committee provides some key performance data for consideration. The first part relates to social work. Of particular note is the data about referrals into the statutory social work service requiring social work intervention. The level of referrals was reducing towards the end of the financial year, and that has actually eased some of the pressure in the service, which was seen as a significant increase, as we all know, during the course of the pandemic. The number of children in care remains relatively high compared to our statistical neighbours, and children experience a range of placement types depending on their need and age. The teams have been working really hard to ensure as many children live in Plymouth or as close to the city as possible. On another stage, as Ming has touched on before, in the past year, the city has made some positive impact on key stage 4 outcomes, which we'll go into on this, although we've not had any assessment results, as Ming has already said. The percentage of schools, as Ming touched on has gone up from good or outstanding Ofsted grade. We've now increased to 78% of our schools have got that, and there's also been an improvement in reduction in NEET, although, as Ming has touched on before, we know there's a long way to go, as the city still has a very low starting point in educational outcomes. So if I pass over to Jean first to carry on.
So the first 5 pieces of data relate to children's social work. And I think it's important to say that, of course, this is not all of our data. We have chosen some key indicators to share with you today. I think we shared an awful lot more at the last scrutiny. We're asked to provide a report with some narrative on key areas. And therefore, we are very happy to think about if there are other issues that you'd like to hear about that we report on next time. So I have focused, as Councillor Carlisle has identified, on referrals and re-referrals into our service, because these have been issues of concern for us, a relatively high rate compared to statistical neighbours and England averages. And we've been working extremely hard with our partners, with whoever makes contact with us to report a concern about a child, that we really are signposting in the right way if a statutory response is not needed, and only thinking about a statutory investigation or assessment where that's absolutely necessary. And although we have more than 16 or 17,000 inquiries of various types throughout the course of the year, you'll see that it's 3,285 last year that turned into statutory referrals. So there's a lot of feedback and conversation about a range of concerns that members of the public and partner agencies might have. So we just wanted to really make that visible. We are making progress, but there is still more to do. In terms of re-referrals, I think we wanted to signal that, as there are other repeat issues in our system, because we are really ambitious to review the themes about practice, if there are themes, about why children return to a statutory service, and if they're not about different issues impacting on them for some reason. If it's the same issue, then as a partnership, as a service, we need to really interrogate what that means for us in terms of the effectiveness of what we do. So that is a theme for us at the moment. So you will see that both in the first piece of data provided, but also in the third piece of data, which relates to children subject to a child protection plan, because children who are subject to a child protection plan also feature in our repeat data. The number of children on child protection plans is reducing. And we've been undertaking a lot of work in terms of children who've been subject to a plan for more than 18 months. And there are a small but significant number of children who do require long plans. And that's especially where there might be issues of domestic abuse, neglect, issues that aren't easily resolvable, where families can live together, but we need to make sure that there is a plan to ensure that that is safe and that children achieve what they need to achieve within the context of what can be quite adverse experiences at times. So I've broken down the children on child protection plans by the category of harm. And that doesn't tell you an awful lot, but it does show you where the predominant issues impacting on families in the city is currently. So there may be some questions from that. I did miss out the second item, which relates to children in need, and that's not all of the children known to our service. It is one group of children. So that's children who are subject to what's called a child in need plan. We don't often talk about these children, but they're a big group of children. We regularly focus on child protection plans and children in care. But children subject to child in need plans are families where they have said, yes, we'd like support. So we don't impose it and we don't require them to work with us in the way that you might have with a child protection plan or within care proceedings. This is a big group of families who are working with us in partnership to support their needs and to ensure that issues don't escalate. Just wanted to surface that number of families so that you could see the range of ways in which we work with families in the city. And then the last piece of data that I've shared at 1.5 in this report is some data related to our care leavers, or as we now refer to young people who are in our care, or care experienced young people. So they've had a care experience as part of their life. And we've produced two bits of evidence for you today. One is the number of children or care experienced young people over the age of 18, under the age of 25, who are living in accommodation that the DfE would deem unsuitable. Now that could be with a friend, living with a friend. It could be bed and breakfast. It could be homeless. Now, we know where all of those young people are. And we're talking about 11 or 12 young people. It fluctuates slightly, but it's a small number of young people, but we do know where they are, and we're working with them to support them into appropriate accommodation. So it's really important that we understand that. And you can see that compared to the England and statistical labour data, we are doing rather better. However, we'd like that to be zero. So we don't rest on our laurels about each of those young people as individual young people. And then the other piece of data that we are working hard to improve is the number of care experienced young people aged over 18 and under 25 who are either in education, employment or training. And we are working very closely with the skills team, with Skills Launchpad, to really improve outcomes for our care experienced young people. And as a city or as a council, the Chief Exec is in the process of signing off a care leaver covenant, which is committing us to all sorts of ways in which we're supporting care experienced young people, including by offering work opportunities for them at a national living wage. And the last thing I would say is that we are due to welcome Mark Riddell back to the city next week. He visited us back in September last year. Colleagues may recall, Mark Riddell is the National Implementation Lead for DfE in respect to children in care and care experienced young people. And we invited him to come and see how we were doing in relation to care experienced, our care experienced offer. And he had many recommendations, as we knew he would, to make, which are setting us ambitious targets beyond basic standards of practice that we are achieving. And he's due back with us next week to see how well we've done. So we're looking forward to that visit, and some colleagues in this room will be part of that session with him. So I'm going to hand over to Ming for your data, Ming.
Thank you, Ming. You're on mute.
I hope I'll attend physically next time.
Yeah.
Okay, I will be. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I'll go take a member through my part of data very quickly. Same as Jim just said that we did not show you all data. I think it will focus on school like internal Ofsted outcome. We did not list the early years or post-16 outcome, which I already mentioned earlier. What I would want to say that we are on the right trajectory. Our improvement in terms of our aspiration that every child attend a good outstanding school is still a long way to go. We make an improvement. But we need to make a more improvement and faster improvement in terms of good outstanding outcome. Attendance, we are broadly in line with the national average, sometimes slightly higher, sometimes slightly lower, depending on quarter. But again, this is the area we really want to focus on vulnerable learner, not just about general attendance. During pandemic, I think some member may have already heard. Actually, our vulnerable learner during pandemic, you may remember, not all children or young people are expected to attend school. Only children who are non-social worker, children who have ESCP can accept physical attendance in school physically. Actually, during that period, we were considerably better than national average. Now return to the usual attendance. We think we'll pick up like vulnerable learners attendance. Again, we want to find out more and then support a particular group. But internal journal attendance, we think to be broadly in line. And also another thing I would like to let you know that once it return to usual, not totally usual, in terms of how DFE collects the attendance data, they did a survey, and it's not mandatory. School can send in the data, or they just say that they're just on top of other things. They can't be on top of everything. They don't have time to return attendance. So nationally, return rate is about 43%. Our is about 90%, 98.5%. So that data we need to, at the moment, still need to look at with care until we have a data, let's say, collected in the usual way, collected and reported and rectified in the usual way. That's probably give you the attendance trend currently in Q4. But again, similarly, it doesn't need. Sometimes you use the term need, sometimes you use the term need. It's about how to turn need into need. Needs not in education, employment, and training, to make sure they are in education, employment, and training. I mentioned earlier we want to have a more coordinated approach in terms of improving the city's need to eat. That figure I want to achieve better. Although in general, 16-17, Q4, as you can see, that data is 91.4%, which is a bit slightly below national average. But I would like to bring to your attention, national average available is Q3, but we don't have Q4's national average yet. And particularly a CN cohort that we think we want to work more to make sure, I think, this particular vulnerable cohort, because they have more challenge in terms of getting employment, training, and education. So that's why our skill team also have a refocus on vulnerable, and particularly the one who have a CN concern. That's internal need. Key stage 4, I want to repeat that we just had some debate about key stage 4. We provide here 3 years trend for your information since 2017, recognizing that it's not like for like comparison because the exam arrangement is different in 2021. But I give you some sort of indications where we are. That's all my data. Any question?
Viv, you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Jean, I was really interested when you said about the 18 to 25-year-olds. Some end up living with a friend, some are in bed and breakfast, and some are homeless. And I'm wondering if we have any who end up homeless, becoming rough sleepers. And if we do we actually go out of our way to support those, especially as they've been in our care? Do we give them extra support and what have you? Because when I did the soup run some time ago, I noticed there were youngsters who were coming for food and clothing. But on the soup run, we're not there to judge or ask questions. We just give out things. So I was itching to say, how old are you? But I didn't, but I'm just wondering if any do end up as our rough sleepers.
So we have some funding from MHCLG linked to the prevention of rough sleeping, and we use that funding, have been using that funding to support a dedicated post, and that's somebody called a personal advisor. So we have personal advisors who support our care experienced young people. Every young person who's a care experienced young person is allocated a PA. They may choose later on not to use that service, but we are legally obliged to provide it. And that worker works with every young person who's care experienced who is in touch with us, because there are some young people over the age of 21 who have chosen not to remain in contact with us, and we can't make them. It's a local offer that we put out there. So all of those that we can, we work to prevent homelessness in any way that we can. So there is a really active response, and we have a dedicated care experience social work team. Well, it's a team, sorry, of the personal advisors supporting all of our are care experienced young people. So it's a really active response to prevent rough sleepers. And we are not aware of any care experienced young people who are rough sleepers currently. And if there were to be any that we're not in touch with that want to come forward for a service, we would welcome them because our local offer is that we will provide information, advice, support and intervention if they wish it.
That's really good, because people do say rough sleepers seem to be getting younger and younger. You know, people are noticing how much younger they are than what they were, say, 10, 20 years ago.
Do we have any more questions? Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Jean and Ming, for that overview. It's really helpful. There's an aspect to this that I wasn't really aware of, which was the children in need caseload. And a question I have around that was, is that a statutory or non-statutory service? And given the resourcing issues you have, which you outlined previously as well, how do you manage that service, given that perhaps other statutory obligations there as well?
So it is a statutory service. So it's Section 17 of the original legislation is the Children Act 1989. So we have duties to offer family support. It's with consent of families, as I've said earlier, and it is the biggest group of families. So at the moment, it's about 900 families, or children, apologies. So that might be, you know, family groups might be slightly less than that. We count in terms of individual children. As such, and as it's consent-based, it really is important that we're actively reviewing that work to make sure we still have consent and that we are making a difference. I think there's some work we can do to work more smartly with those families in terms of making sure it's the right intervention at the right time for the right length of time. And it doesn't just have to be a social work resource. Actually, it can be a partnership-wide resource and could include services from the targeted support service, as I mentioned earlier, whether that's parenting support, youth work support for young people within the families, whatever that might mean. And actually that comes from Martine's part of the service, who's just joined us actually to talk about youth service provision shortly. Martine is the manager for that targeted support service. So it is a big group of children, and it's very easy to overlook that. So we're focused on it in a very clear way at the moment. They break down into two groups, and this will be the last thing I say, I promise. The first group is those children who've just come into the service through the front door, so our referral and assessment service, where they're receiving an assessment of what those needs might be, so that we can formulate a plan with families about what might best help. And then there's another group of children where we have already made a decision that we are going to offer a family support service, and they would be supported by our children's social work team. So they'd move into a more longer term support team. We are piloting at the moment what we're calling a sin prevention team. So for short-term interventions where families don't want us in their lives long-term, but where we can offer some really meaningful, short but impactful interventions.
You got supplementary?
Maybe very short supplementary,
Yeah.
and that is just to try and understand what the agreement is with the family and how does that work? Is it how binding is it, and what are the consequences if the agreement breaks down in some way?
It's consent-based, so we do have a consent form that we work with families, so there is explicit and informed consent about what they are engaging with. They can withdraw that consent at any time they want to. The only caveat would be if we were really concerned about a family, then we might want to work with them to say, really, are you quite ready yet? So we would work with families to say, we think there's some more we can do to support, and we may need to consider whether the time is right, but families have absolutely the right to withdraw at that point, at that level of need.
Dylan, and then Natalie, and then Anna, Andrea. Okay, we're going to be at about a quarter of an hour over time at this rate, so if you're happy with that, we'll go forward with those questions. So Dylan first, then Natalie, then Andrea.
I've got two questions for you, Jean. The first one is on re-referrals. Is there anything being looked into to see if children are being placed back with biological families too quickly, and whether there's any investigations into making sure that if provisions are necessary, they are held in care for longer for their own safety. And the second one is around care leavers. I was very surprised to see that living with friends is listed as an unsuitable accommodation. And is there any distinction between this being inappropriate placements or genuine placements? For example, I'll use my personal experience. When I was booted out at 17 by my parents, I lived with my friend, her mum and dad, and her younger sister. Would that classify as an unsuitable placement, or would they, or is there a distinction between two different ones?
So the definition of unsuitable may not be, we might think that that's the most suitable for a young person in the whole circumstances. Ideally, we'd be wanting a young person to have accommodation offered of an independent nature that meets their needs, as is our responsibility to those young people. The definition by the DFE about unsuitable is what I was referring to. So it doesn't automatically count as a suitable arrangement from that definition. So when we're doing our performance reporting, that's how I meant it. It is actually much more complex than that, as you set out, in terms of what might be the best option for a young person. And they can choose. They're adults. We want to support them to make those choices about who they live with and where they live. What we want to make sure, though, is that they're not doing it because there isn't another alternative for them. So that's where we have to take our responsibility quite seriously. The first issue that you raised in terms of re-referrals, they are not necessarily about children having been reunified home and coming back into care. Our adolescent support team, who undertake a significant amount of that reunification work, wrap support around the family for a period of time, and that can be an extended period of time, months and months, in order to make sure that that situation endures and is sustainable. And therefore, we won't count something as successful in terms of a reunification until that young person has been home, we would say, for about a year, in order to say, we think that's worked. And that doesn't stop us then offering more support if the family say, oh, we're having a wobble. So it isn't something that has a kind of a fast and fixed end to it. The re-referrals, it's much more fluid than that. It might be children who've been on a child in need plan, that families have decided they don't want the support but can come back. Child protection plans where everybody thinks that they've successfully made a difference, but something goes wrong and things need to come back for further planning and support. So it's a much richer and more diverse range of reasons. And we're looking at all of those to look at how we can improve our practice.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Cecily?
Okay, thank you. I've got two questions as well. One follows on from that, I think, really, about child in need. How many cases, do we have data that tells us how many cases increase and move up from child in need to child protection, so from section 17, and equally, sort of how many move from child in need successfully and stay out of the system?
So I don't have that data at my fingertips, but we could certainly look at that to provide something that helps you understand that move through or step down. I'm very happy to provide that, but I would be estimating, I think, in an unhelpful way if I were to say anything today. So if it's okay, I'd like us to be able to come back with that data. Perhaps that's something we can share next time, unless you want it more urgently than that.
Just keep an eye. Thank you. And the other area was where we're saying about schools requiring improvement, what work is being done and what sort of data is available as to the areas that they require improvement? Because, okay, they might be requires improvement overall, but is it specific areas that are coming up on a regular basis that need to be looked at and targeted by the services to ensure that there is better, so better outcomes, or is it across the board?
So I'm going to defer to Ming for that one.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you asked a very good question. Yeah, there are two systems here. One is what I talk about partnership. In a partnership, it's not just about people gathering, meeting, and then they go away. They work on a program. They have agreed self-evaluation, a peer support to identify exactly the area they need to improve on, whether school can help themselves, trust can help themselves, whether they need for cross-trust partnership working. That's what we've been working on. That's why in past 2 months, we have 3 secondary schools that move from require improvement to good in the city. Yeah, because they support each other, they have greater support, they identify the area they need for each school. You're absolutely right. Each school have different need. They have different area improvement. Although there's one particular pattern we have identified, leadership is really both top leadership and the middle tier leadership. Another area we identified internal commonality is curriculum, curriculum design, delivery, and impact. But apart from that, there are other unique needs to be addressed. Those have been addressed by our partnership at the place-based secondary school program. Primary and special school now also develop their own self-evaluation program and a peer support program, early ESM. Another system we are in place. In the local authority, we have a school causing concern system. It's not school immediately causing concern, we will go out to intervene. We gather information from different agencies, like in the Jean's area, social care. Actually, social care sit in our school causing concerns panel. That's exactly what you're saying, that they may need to improve on the safeguarding arrangement. And that's the area of concern. It's not just about teaching and learning. So we put together these resources, those information, and then we try to make a picture out of the pieces of jigsaw. And then if any concern reach to a certain threshold, we escalate it to school at risk. Then at that point, you want to maintain school, we intervene directly. If it's the academy, we liaise with the DLV, because academy belong to DLV, later intervene. So that's a system in place to identify each school's improvement need. To answer your question, yes, we do have a mechanism to identify those needs.
Okay, all right, Natalie. Andrea, do you want to ask very quickly? Sorry, I keep saying to you very quickly.
Jean, I don't know if this is for you or for Ming. Okay, I have a little story and I just need some advice on it really while you're here. We talk about early intervention, yeah. There's a little girl who's 3 with autism, yeah. Now, we're talking, like I said, early intervention. It's going to be a year before she can be seen for her autism, okay, that's not really early intervention, is it? On top of that, the parents have to, or her mum can't work because the child needs 24 care at home. So what she's asking, what sort of funding is out there for her. They're also saying that the child has to go to mainstream school, which she finds that not right. And I totally agree with her there. That's what she's been told. So what support is out there for these parents with these children with autism and high, complex needs is what I'm asking you, please, Jean.
So I'll start, and I'm sure Ming will talk about the education assessment element of it. In terms of preventative supportive services, it sounds on the face of it, and we would need to know a lot more about that individual child, and it's not appropriate for us to talk at child level detail here. But it sounds like that might be a child who would be entitled to Section 17 support, and therefore a request by her family could be made for an assessment of what support needs might be helpful between now and any assessment, or indeed anyway, for her support needs, whatever they might be. And that could come from our statutory service, and there is a children with disabilities team who have expertise and are specialists in supporting families where there are issues related to disability, to support parents in all that they're endeavouring to do. And that will include thinking about financial package of support should certain provision be needed. But again, we need to know more detail before we could make that decision. The other route would be for the family to think about requesting some advice and support about what might be available at an early help stage. And we do have a team called the EHAST. Now that stands for Early Help, Advice and Support Team. And if I haven't got that acronym right, my team will poke me visually from the side. I don't enjoy acronyms, but it is an early help advice and support team. And they could offer some support in conjunction with our children disabilities team about where might best support be sought from. So I would really advise any family in that situation to talk to us, to make contact and to have a conversation about where best they might get the kind of needs and support that they would best find helpful. So I've realised I'm talking quite vague terms, but there are very specific ways that they can talk to somebody to get that signposting and intervention. And I'll leave the assessment part of it to Ming in terms of the bigger issues.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, if you could just answer this quite speedily, and then if there's a particular issue that Councillor Loveridge needs addressing in terms of the case that she's raised, whether that could be something that's sorted out offline. Thank you.
It's just quickly in terms of assessment of diagnosis of autism, which is carried out by health services. We understand, we liaise closely with the health service. We understand they do have a waiting list. Having said that, the thing at EHCP assessment, having that formally confirmed with that budget, you like or not, there's a possibility, there's a misconception that in order to get support, you need to have that identified, but actually, like Jim described, a lot of support can be provided while they're being carried out by health services. Again, I can't get into individual case, or I don't know individual case. What I'm saying is the diagnosis of autism, the delay of that, shouldn't stop school continue to support what school can support. Of course, school cannot provide what medical health service can support, but in terms of education, they should continue to support what they need to support. And our educational psychologists, they do liaise with school regularly on the support school need to put place for the children who are waiting for health service autism diagnosis. So I will welcome, again, give us the detail of the name, and then we can check with educational psychologists to see whether school support being in place.
Yep, is that okay, Andrea?
Yeah, I just want to say she's that desperate at the moment. I'll just quickly that she's looking to get peppercorn funding for this and bring the relevant people Ofsted to try and, because she just doesn't feel there's enough. But so that's fine, Ming. We'll email you and we'll go from there. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Loveridge. And I was going to say that we could have a bit of a discussion around the data and if it's what we wanted. But I wonder if, just so we can move things on, if you can go away and think about whether that data is what you're after, or if there's other things you would like. I'm sure Paul, who's lurking in the background there, you would be able to get that for us, Paul, wouldn't you? So if anybody wants to email me in the intervening time to say, yes, I'd like to see X thing that's, once you've kind of had to think about it, then I can, hopefully I can get, the thumbs up from Paul, that I can contact Paul and he can, because he collates all this for us. So great, thank you very much. Right, so Tina, thank you very much for hanging on for us. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Carlisle, I think, to introduce this, but then you're going to give us the Kickstart scheme update. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for people who don't know about the Kickstart scheme, it's been led by the Department of Work and Pensions, and it's part of the government's plan for jobs. So the Kickstart scheme has had a £2 billion fund to create thousands of high-quality work placements specifically for young people. The programme has run until March 2022 because it got extended, and the final placement is being concluded this September. In Plymouth alone, we've had 400 young people have been supported through this scheme into work placements, which is fantastic. It's still too early to say any of the assessment. I don't want to overthink anything that Tina says, but it's still too early to say about the assessment of the impact of this initiative because the final assessment's happening in December of this year. But currently we're seeing approximately 60% of these young people transitioning into full-time employment, which is really good news. Over to Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so just to follow on from that, so in Plymouth, there's really been two key gateway organisations, and between them, they have supported just over 400 placements. We are seeing that 60% transition rate, but we will know the final figures at the end of September. And we are working with the gateways to identify young people who have actually dropped out or been unsuccessful in securing a full-time placement through Skills Launchpad Plymouth, as well as supporting a number of other young people. And I think what's really interesting is since last year, so we've seen a 20% fall from March 2021 to March 2022, and that's seen a reduction from 4,900 to 3,900 under 25-year-olds now in UC claimants. So over 1,000 young people now have transitioned into work on top of the year school leavers and college leavers as well. And we are pretty much now at our pre-pandemic figures. So the expectation was that would probably take 5 years to recover, and we're now back to where we were pre-pandemic 2 years on. So I think it's really exciting. I'm really excited to see what the Skills Launchpad will continue to do, at the end of these placements to support people into work. And we're going to continue working through Skills Launchpad and through our neat working groups and our sectoral partnerships to ensure that our young people are aware of all of the opportunities in the city. And we're actually currently at our lowest figure for UC claimants under 25 now, like I say, in 2 years. I don't know if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask.
Yeah, I've got a question. I think, yeah, it's those figures are impressive. I just wondered, so we're saying 60% of these young people have transitioned into full-time employment. What's the position of the other 40%?
So the other 40%, we're trying to, some of them are engaged through Skills Launchpad, and we're working with them through action plans to help them transition into employment, into education or into training. Some of the young people have decided not to engage, so they've commenced a Kickstart placement but not completed. But where we have engagement, we're working with the gateways, we're working with local employers to make sure where we can, we support those young people through Skills Launchpad to transition into work.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, so Kickstart doesn't exist after whenever it is, December. We're not just going to abandon that work, that's going to then just be fed into the Skills Launchpad, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So our long-term sustainable approach is through Skills Launchpad. I think for our city, Kickstart has been more successful than what it's been across the UK. And what we're looking to do is to work with employers to help them to develop paid placements. We have 3,000 vacancies in the city. We have 380 vacant apprenticeships. And we know our employers have recruitment issues. So we think that if we can work with them to recruit people in a different way, and if they can almost provide a paid placement, this is a great way for them to try a young person before transitioning them into an apprenticeship or into a full-time employment opportunity.
Thank you. I've got Ian, then I've got Dylan, and then I've got...
Yes, I've had a meeting with two of the Kickstarters at Saltram, working with Green Minds and the National Trust, and I think there was 12 that were taken on originally, and 2 have progressed into full-time employment. However, I know that employment is actually on 6-month contracts, so I'm just thinking about how we're defining full-time employment, and also as well, keen to see this carry on actually, because I think it's a great initiative, but I'd like to see a breakdown by sector as well across the city, so where we're really focusing on and how's that linking with our inclusive growth agenda within the city and Resurgam.
So how are we measuring? We're measuring through DWP standards, which is in employment 13 weeks after the placement, which is a standard measure, and that's what we use for all of our benchmarks for employment. Sector detail we can provide you post meeting. We can look to provide some details around that. How is it helping with the inclusive in growth agenda? All of the people who were available to take up a Kickstart placement had to be unemployed for up to 6 months, had to be unemployed for 6 months or longer. So this was really focused on giving a helping hand to some people who may have previously really struggled to find employment or provide work.
Okay. I can't remember what order I said now. Dylan?
Just a question that I think will be helpful for future scrutiny on this. Just to get the data on how many of these universal credit claimants between the ages of 16 and 24 are in full-time further education, because I know that they won't have the requirement to find employment whilst they're still in training.
Did you want to come back on that, Tina?
No, we'll have to go back and have a look at the data. But we're limited by the data we get from DWP, but we could ask and request that. They will have further information which we can request and I can provide at future scrutiny.
What I was envisaging is, sorry, and then I will come to you, Natalie,
Yeah.
was that we would bring, after the December roundup, you could bring the final report to us to the February scrutiny, and we could have all that information, the sector stuff. I'm also really interested in how we performed compared to our statistical neighbours and other local authorities. If we could have like a full report once the Kickstart scheme comes to an end, because I think there might be valuable things in there for us to, even if it's stopped in the form of Kickstart, that we can, bring into Skills Launchpad and other initiatives. If everybody thinks that's a good way of dealing with it. I will come to your question, Natalie, but I just think maybe February would be the one to bring it to, wouldn't it? If it all comes to an end in December and you start getting, that's lots of time to get the data that we're requesting as well. Natalie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yeah, moving on from that, in terms of the data, you mentioned 60% of Kickstarters still being in employment. Do you have the data, or could the data be added about whether they're in employment with the original company, organisation that they were signed up for, or is it that actually after the 6 months they have left that? Because I am aware that there's obviously a lot of organisations take them on for the 6 months because obviously there was an incentive and then don't have them afterwards. So are those young people still with that original employer, or has the 60% been that actually they've been able to then transfer to another organisation using the skills that they've learned in that initial Kickstart program?
Yes, so it's a combination. Again, I can provide that data, but it is a combination. But our gateways were, did work really hard to secure placements where they felt that would lead to long-term employment, and where long-term employment wasn't sought, they worked with partner organisations to help transition those young people into employment. So that 60% is a combination of both. It's with the current employer and with new employers through the upskilling.
Thank you. Got any further questions? No, that's great, Tina. So we'll see you then in next February.
Chair, can I just add another note? Something following on from Jean, really. We know the Kickstart placements ended, but we've actually created a 6-month work placement in Skills Launchpad. So we've got a care experienced young person starting with us as a grade B shortly. So I'm really excited, and I think it's a fantastic initiative. So I just wanted to add that in because I think it's a really good news.
Well, maybe we could hear from them in February.
Yeah.
It'd be good. We have had some, young people who've been in placements and things have come to scrutiny just to talk to us about what they've done and how it's gone for them. So, just put that thought out there. We could invite them maybe in February. Ming, sorry.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ming.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to say that I have another important meeting. They're waiting for me to chair at 4 o'clock. I look at the agenda, probably most of my part.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, we have overrun. I do apologise, but yes, I think that's fine, Ming, because Martine and Dave are here to.
Yeah. Jane, my
do the
colleague
next one.
Jane and Charlotte
Yeah.
will convey anything I need to pick up.
Thank you very
Chair.
much, Ming, for all your input today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tina. Thank you. So yes, I do apologise, we have overrun, but I think there might be an argument for extending this meeting a little bit, but I think it's been useful because we've had a good overview and there's lots of new people to the committee. Everybody's asked at least one question, if not more, which hasn't, I don't think has happened, certainly not while I've been chairing, so which is really positive.
Sorry, Chair. Are people allowed to come in and be invited in? I've got somebody from Lithwell wants to come in and do a presentation or just do, talk to us about some really good things that's going on. So can we do that, Chair?
Yeah, we can have a discussion about that, definitely.
Can
Yeah, okay, thank you. So now I'm going to thank you very much for your patience, Dave and Martine, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Carlisle to introduce this, and then Dave and Martine will give us their report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk a little bit longer on this one. So this report has been requested by Scrutiny Committee to provide an update on citywide youth service provision and is for information. So sorry, I'm going to read down, my head will be down a little bit, but there's quite a lot here. So the youth services in Plymouth are provided by the local authority children, young people and family services and community connections alongside voluntary and third sector agencies, and they provide specialist intervention support for children and young people, usually aged between 11 to 18. So Martine Selfs is here and representing Children's Services Targeted Support Service. They have a range of youth workers who seek to support young people at the earliest opportunity so that their support needs can be met and support them in their own families, as we've been saying before. Youth workers will support in a range of ways, including one-on-one direct support, facilitating groups to address concerns around exploitation and grooming, online safety and healthy relationships, and also provide drop-in groups and safe spaces for young people to access to meet others and have the opportunity to just talk with someone that they can trust. This also includes youth workers who support young people aged 16 to 17 years old who present as homeless in the city, which I touched on before. These workers support young people and their families when there's a risk of homelessness at that age. Youth workers, they also offer direct support for children and young who go missing from home or in care. Increasingly, we found ourselves in the unfortunate position that recruitment of professional youth workers is becoming more of a challenge. It seems to be something that's going across the sector here, and they are working closely with Marjon to try and address this, as well as now exploring, as Tina was alone, the apprenticeship opportunities within the service. We have Dave here as well, is from Community Connections, and has set out a wide range of youth service provision offered in the community, including youth groups, the Young Carers Project, and detached youth work provision. The report that's already been included covers a range of funding opportunities that have been secured or funding or stuff that has been actively applied for. So over to Dave and Martine.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to come here today to talk about community youth service. So, the community youth service is its form is based from three predominant centres, being Efford, Honicknall, South Way, and we also have use of Estover as well. But our main service delivery is from those locations. We also provide a great deal of detached youth work across the city, looking at areas of risk-taking or antisocial or criminal behaviour. The service is small. We've got 18 members of staff, and the variety of programmes that we offer look at where we've got young people that we know need support. We do open door sessions. We work with groups, we run programmes for Out Youth, which is run from Frederick Street, 2 sessions per week. We work with autistic young people, trying to provide an opportunity for young people to thrive. A lot of our work is targeted in group sessions. It's not targeted in the sense of Martine's teams and services. We're very much voluntary engagement and trying to reach out to our community, listen to what our young people are saying that they need, and tailor our services to meet those needs. You'll see from the paper that I've provided, or we've provided together, there's a lot of funding opportunities that we're seeking at the moment. We're trying, over the last few years, the COVID has impacted our service, finances have impacted our service, and what we're at now is a point where we're looking to grow. We're growing our programs. We're engaging more and more with young people. A lot at the moment is engagement around young people in Kiam, and seeing what their needs are and seeing how we can develop a program to support them to be able to thrive moving forwards. And that's something that we're looking at in many of our programs. So it's a really exciting service. It's something that really brings me great joy to be part of and to work with the teams. And I'll welcome some questions, of course, in due course, but I don't know if Martine wants to give a slight overview of her service as well.
Thank you. Okay, might move forward. So targeted support services have a range of teams. Within those teams, I have professional youth workers that work doing really targeted interventions with each of our young people. And they range from the early help system where they're not requiring a statutory intervention, but actually we really need to provide some advice and support and some befriending at some points, all the way through to our adolescent support team and our reach team, who are both working with those really much more high-end young people who are their behaviours are really sort of concerning for us. So across the service, I have, I think, 13 youth workers split between 5 teams at the moment. And again, like Dave, we've had some real challenges for recruitment, but we are now looking at expanding those teams. And so we've had some really good growth and development, some funding that's come through to us to really be able to start to expand those teams. And what we know is that we really need to be responding to these young people instantly, within days as opposed to weeks on a waiting list, because that's when they need that help and support. In respect of my teams, the youth workers will work alongside social workers, they'll work alongside youth justice workers and our family support teams to really wrap support around families, to really think, taking the child's perspective, the young person's perspective, and helping to mediate between them and their parents so that we can really try to prevent family breakdown, which is one of the issues that we have at the moment. They will also deliver and develop parenting programs, so that sometimes they're really well placed to do some of that parenting work with our parents, and they do some really great jobs. And we're also at the moment just in the process of developing our group work program again, and that is really expanding. We really want to reach out to families and children and provide them that ongoing support before it gets to crisis point and before they start to feel that they need a real sort of crisis intervention. So across the service, again, like Dave says, we are challenged by recruitment, so we are looking at apprenticeships and things like that. We have also just employed a care leaver as one of our apprentices, and I'm looking to improve that or increase that by another 4, so that we can really start to grow some of our own, as well as getting into margins and really encouraging professional youth workers to come and work for the local authority. There's some really innovative ideas out there at the moment that we're trying to develop.
Thank you. So over to questions. I've got a question. I don't know if anybody else has got questions. So you referred to family breakdown as a particular issue at the moment. Is there a particular reason for that? I mean, you know, I'm concerned about the cost of living crisis and the ongoing impacts of that, and whether issues around money and finance, do you find that that's contributing in any way? Is that one of the factors, or what would you say is the thing about family breakdown at the moment?
So for me, the cost of living crisis, I don't think we're seeing that. I think that's going to be a real issue as in the next coming months. I think we're really going to start to see the impact of that happening. I think COVID was a huge impact. So we know that teenagers have their own, they live in their own world, and things have been really difficult for families that have had to have their children at home all the time, and sometimes that has an impact. I think the lack of resource, being able to get to people in a timely way, has not helped. And so that's something that we're really starting to develop. So we are really refocusing lots of my service into the front door to start to be able to respond in a timely way. But I think that the impact of the pandemic on young people's mental health and their isolation, we are really starting to see that as a huge, huge impact for us now.
Thank you. And if I could just ask another, how do you, and it may sound a really obvious question, but how do people know about your service and what you offer? How do people in the city know what you do?
We are out there now. So we are doing a lot of work with our partner agencies as part of the Family Hub development. And I don't know how much people are aware of the Family Hub's development. So there is a lot of cross-working across our partners and joint working so that we can really start to build some resilience in the early help system, as opposed to it being a local authority offer, it becomes an early help system offer. So our city's response to our young people. And we are just growing that. We work really closely with Dave's team in a way to do that. So and we just need to, I mean, Plymouth Argyle, people like that, we're really trying to get ourselves out. The difficulty with really getting ourselves out there is that then how do we respond in a timely way? So so there's a sense of me that's saying we need to build this resilience and we need to build the resource into the system before we become too wide, because then we're not responding to anyone, and that would be an issue for me.
Thank you. Councillor Cree? Oh, sorry, Jean, apologies.
Just to add to what Martine has said, there is, in terms of accessibility of information about various offers, there is the Plymouth online directory that can be accessed by anybody. Now, there is always a tension as to whether that is as up to date as we would like it. So Martine's service has also developed a bespoke directory so that we send that out far and wide to a range of partner agencies as well as our own service. And we do need to think about how widely we circulate that so that there is real understanding about what is on offer at the earliest possible opportunity. But it is available on the Plymouth online directory for anybody who needs to look at that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor. Just in terms of our service, whilst we work very closely, I just would like to give a little bit of access around our service as well. So we use social media and we promote. So during COVID, for example, we ran programs on Teams, we ran it on Zoom, we did programs on Facebook for photography. One of the things that we've just secured is some funding to look at improving and increasing our kind of digital use, and we will be engaging further. So looking at the way young people communicate now is not necessarily even Facebook, it's Instagram, it's Snapchat, and how can we use our skill set of our youth workers, and when we'll work with Martine's teams, of course, and wider teams, to reach more and more young people. So it will tie in exactly to the family hubs model, well-being, but it's also about using the tools to enable young people to contact us when they need, not just adults to contact us when they see it.
So I've got Charlotte, and then Ian, and then Andrea, and then Natalie.
I was for Dave. So the last time we talked about the youth services in the KIM, we were talking about you were struggling to find the young people in KIM. So I guess I'd just like an update on that, really. Have we found them? And have we really discussed with them what they want this money to be spent on, so that we're doing what they need, not what we think they need?
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, we have found them. It's a good starting point. Yes, we have found them. I would always like to find more, to get more and more voices, certainly in the work that we develop. So yes, we've found a cohort of young people in KIM that we are now working with, and slightly wider than KIM as well. We have some programs running. We are looking at the shed, I believe it is, the hut. So there is a meeting on that one today, and the strategy of engagement around young people. So there should be an event later this month. There will be a further event in due course, which is being organised. And thanks again to the councillors for investing in that. So yes, we found them. Yes, we've come up with a programme, and yes, we are seeking to deliver that over the next couple of months.
Just following on what you were saying, Dave, around engaging hard to reach groups. Young people are notoriously hard to reach, and it's really pleasing that you're using digital skills to try and get there, and probably know that a range of things like TikTok and Instagram and that sort of thing. Is there any other ways we can connect with them other than through digital, and what are the barriers potentially for them engaging? Not just it's connecting's easy, but removing barriers to engage those services particularly.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think one of the learnings that we take from COVID is that young people are quite, a lot of young people, what we've seen, have become quite digitally reliant. So we have professional youth workers who want to engage with young people. We have an issue whereby young people are staying in home and potentially engaging online. In fact, conversations with some young people, I was hanging out with my friends last night. Well, that's different to what it was when I was younger, because I went and played tennis with them, or I went and hung around on the streets, or whatever it might have been. And when they say that, it's because they're doing it digitally. So we've kind of taken that on board. The funding that I talk about does look to improve our digital offerings. So is it gaming from one of our centres? We're meeting with one of the city colleges tomorrow having got some funding through the door, to look at if we've got the youth workers who want to engage young people, but we haven't necessarily got the digital offering, but now we're looking to bring the digital offering in and making it fun, making it an enjoyable experience, not come in and be taught about something. It's come in and enjoy engaging with us and working with us. So yes, looking beyond digital, we have detached workers who are out on the street to find them young people and work with them. We have programs, open door sessions, which kind of reaches our maximum in terms of our staffing at the moment. But partners are great. Plymouth Argyle runs some fantastic programs barefoot as well. So we do work with a lot of other people.
Okay. Andrea?
Thank you, Chair. Have you ever thought about an app? Is it possible to have an app?
Oh, okay. I would love to have an app. It's over the last 12 months, it's been a real push to try and secure some funding to improve and enhance our digital abilities. I've had conversations with Delt. I've had conversations with well, we've got the conversations, like I say, tomorrow. Conversations with Plymouth University. So we're really in the early stages. So yes, digital is massive but we need some time to catch up. But it really feels that we're at the start of that now.
How does the committee feel? Maybe we ought to make a recommendation that you go away and do some more work on that to bring back to us about the possibility of an app, because I think it's interesting. We talk about Plymouth Online Directory and we hear about it all the time, and we know it exists, but I don't, lots of people in the city don't go, oh, I'll look at Plymouth Online Directory and I'll find out X, Y, Z thing. If you had something around youth services, an app that then, if, obviously we'd have to speak to young people to see if they actually think they would use it. Our assumption is they may well not. But I wonder if we could recommend that you, if it's okay, go away and do some work around seeing what we can do to advance that, because having it kind of all in one place seems like a logical next step in what we've, like you said, what we've learned from COVID. But also, the interesting thing is that although they are very much more digitally engaged, we know, don't we, that their isolation and missing human contact was a really key thing during COVID. So we don't want anything that kind of perpetuates that. But yeah, how does the committee feel about that? Yeah? Is that right, Dave? Giving you some work to do.
It's absolutely fine. I wouldn't want to develop anything without the voice of the young people there. So
exactly.
It's really important to me. So of course I'll bring that back and try my best.
One more thing. And what is the age? Have you got an age limit of these children and young adults?
We work up until the age of 25, but predominantly it's up to the age of 18. That's where we see our engagement mostly. To give some context, 516 young people had engagements with us as a service last month. So we are engaging quite a lot. And as we've kind of eased out of the COVID restrictions, which were heavily felt across the service, we are seeing that number kind of creep back up. And this kind of period, especially coming into the summer mixed period and where we've got more provision arranged for engagement as well. So it's a good opportunity for us to kind of speak to more young people.
Thank you.
All right. Can we have a formal vote on that recommendation for Dave to go away and do some more work around the app as a recommendation from this committee?
Yeah, agree.
Okay, thank you. Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. You touched on family hubs being a partner, sort of agency, or you worked with with family hubs. Obviously, your youth provision is quite focused in certain areas, and obviously, although you do detached work, I am presuming that detached work is within the scope of those areas. Certain areas on the outlying areas have no youth work provision. And it's missed. It is needed in all areas of our city. So are you working with other organisations to try and actively help with that? I'm thinking of the schools, obviously, to some degree, but also with the wellbeing hubs and the provision. I appreciate that you connect community connections, attend wellbeing hub meetings, that type of thing. But what is being done for the outlying areas that are not part of your focused provision?
Can I start with that? And then I'm sure Martine and Dave might have other comments. In terms of the family hubs development and that transformation, we're still very much in a planning phase with the Early Help Partnership who've been commissioned to work together and with the local authority to think about the scope and the location of key family hubs. So that work is ongoing at the moment. There is an early help partnership executive that is leading that work, and there is an operational group that is really now beginning to drive that forward. So the kind of questions that you're asking are exactly the questions that are being considered as part of that mapping and scoping. So we will be able to report on that over time as that becomes more concrete and clarified. So very much in our thinking. I don't know if there's anything else to
In the interim, we are trying to do some really joined up working with schools, with our education colleagues, doing pilots in schools where we can go and provide bespoke packages of pop-up youth work support where there's a need. So we're spending some time with some of our education colleagues just thinking about what is the issues for you in your school at the moment, rather than just putting a blanket one-size-fits-all across the city, because no one has the resource to do that. Thinking really clearly with them about what is their needs, and then we can come in and try and support them, delivering packages of support, but actually then supporting them to carry on delivering those packages of support over time. So whilst we're waiting for our family hubs to come online, we are really trying to think creatively about how we work across the system so that we can provide additional support in the interim.
Supplementary to that, are you working with the police as well? Because I'm aware that the police are working in some of the schools to try and find out where there are issues, particular issues going on.
Yeah, so I also manage the Youth Justice Service, who runs the Early Intervention and Prevention Service. And again, we're working really closely with education. Just pulled health in, so we've got them now supporting us with some of the mental health issues that we're seeing, those low-level mental health. So we're developing some programs of work alongside those as well, and with our substance misuse partners. So just really trying to give a really wide package of support that people can pick and choose the bits that they need from.
Thank you. Tom, and then...
It's really welcome to hear about joined up thinking with schools. I'm just thinking back to my time as a secondary school form tutor. There's some really exciting projects that I wasn't necessarily aware of at that point, that maybe a form tutor or a head of house or head of year, the pastoral leads, if they have a greater understanding of what Plymouth City Council offers, they might be able to refer particularly vulnerable students to those services. So is there anything more that can be done to communicate with Plymouth pastoral leads so they in turn can communicate that down to form tutors who work closely with their form groups?
So we've just recruited a specific person who's going to be going out and speaking to each of the schools and the MAT CEOs as well, so that we can really start to think with those schools, what are your, like I say, what are your issues, what are your concerns, what's really bothering you as a group of people, so that we can provide therapeutic workshops. So we're trying to think really differently, so it's not a long-term 10 session. It's really hard for some young people to engage with, but actually maybe just a 1.5 hour workshop on a specific subject. People can pick and choose that. It's like a pick and mix. So Laura, who will be going out to the schools, is literally going to keep going to each school and offering that as a package, showing the package and saying, is there other stuff you want? Is there more to this that people might need for specific areas? And then come September, we will be in a position with our partners to be able to deliver that group work, that programme of work across the schools. So.
And Dylan.
It's really welcome to see that the Out Youth group for LGBT plus youth is included as part of the main package. But I'm wondering how other services, all the other youth services actually support LGBT plus young people, particularly trans and non-binary young people who may not be able to access the Out Youth group due to safety concerns at home, and how the trans and non-binary people who say aren't out about it yet will know that your services are safe for them to talk to a youth worker at those places, and that it won't go any further because being trans and non-binary is not a safeguarding risk.
So the Out Youth group is run out of Frederick Street, which is one of my centres, and then but run by Dave's. This is our cross-working Dave's service. But if any young people that we come across that have those issues, so we will do that really one-to-one direct support before we think about referring on to the Out Youth group. Certainly in respect of some of the safeguarding concerns that come to light for us, where these are issues for young people. So there is So my youth workers will work really quite closely with the Out Youth group facilitators about really supporting those and attend with them if that's what's required. Bring them to Frederick Street, help them understand what it looks like, where they're coming, what they're doing, collect them if that's what they need to do, pick them up and bring them over. But in the first instance, we would be looking at doing that one-to-one, just so that they are really confident the point that they can then access that group.
And just to build on that, so one of the things that we do across the services, we do have team meetings. So within those team meetings, we talk about all the programs that we run, how people can gain support, how engagements can and should take place for young people. We can do one-to-one, whilst we tend to do things in groups. We can take that time out and spend some time with a young person to speak to them about anything that they're challenging in their life. You know, our objective is to lead a person to a place where they can thrive. It may not be that they can attend that session, but they can attend an open door session. They can still get that support, that advice, that guidance, whatever it is that they may need in that session.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. And thank you very much for bearing with us while we overran. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the work programme now. So I've been jotting things down as we've been going. What are your thoughts, Jake? I'm going to hand over to you.
So I've included a few things. So Joss McAllister's independent review and whether those recommendations can be brought to the next scrutiny. Yeah. But that might have a whole raft of things in there, so it might be a pretty big meeting.
I mean, I've got loads here. The National Tutoring Programme, the impact of that. I've obviously got the care review, the workforce strategy. Results, I mean, Ming's gone now, but whether results would be coming in September's meeting. I mean, I think that is the data around that is something that we will be wanting to see in September.
Yes, that data analysis, and also as well, starting to look as well, including almost alongside that, this whole issue about inclusion, exclusions. I'd rather refer to it as inclusion. That data as well, running along.
Yeah. Go on.
There was also a plan of in November potentially looking at the white papers specifically in relation to education, and then we can sort of look at individual areas in there as well, if that's appropriate.
That one perhaps.
Yeah, if members agree. Yeah.
Your thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, I think that would be. I think that would probably be that would be helpful, especially as well we were going to look not just at the white paper but also at the green paper as well, because there's a lot of overlap between the two, and there's a big issue about inclusion within that mentioned in both of those papers.
Because our aspiration is that we will have some senior MAT leaders at that meeting. So actually, I think the conversation around inclusion would be useful to be had with them. As many as them that come, would be useful to be had with them in the room, I think.
We also said something about the briefing on finance as well. Was there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could come back as a regular item. Sharon, I'm going to invite you, of course. Yes, your input.
To sit and observe. I wonder whether we could share some data prior to November, so that you've actually had time to see some data. So the session in November, you're absolutely in a place where you've digested the information. Maybe you put some questions back to us through that mechanism, and then we can really get to a very focused session in November. And so it's a long time to wait, isn't it? And I can see fantastically the energy in the room. So I wouldn't want to delay that. So how about that as a bit of a solution? So you have some information, and then we can really think about a focused session in November.
Can I ask Jean and Charlotte if there's anything coming Cabinet's way that you think ought to be coming via us, either before or after? Or?
Not immediately from CYPFS. We need to check with Ming, though, so that we could come back.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I just bring up a couple of things that I thought we could scrutinise, but it's obviously up to the committee. One with that national review of those two kiddies who were murdered, there were 8 recommendations, and what how this affects the council if we're doing any work picking that up or whatever. And the other thing I thought would be interesting, because Jean said there's more work to do about preventing children from coming into care. And I think that would be interesting to know, because I think that's important. If we can prevent them from coming into care in a safe way, that would solve a lot of the problems. I'll leave it there because that's the two I would be really interested in.
I wondered if we could tie that in with some kind of report around where we are with the early help hubs. Would that tie in together, or what do you think?
They're two parts of a huge continuum of work, so I don't mind them being joined, but they are quite distinct, and I have different people reporting on each of those. The timing in terms of Educare, we can talk about children at the edge of care and the preventative work that we do with outcomes as to where we are, but we've also got quite an ambitious plan in terms of work over the next 3 years, so we can set that out in relation to that issue, and we can ask for a report from the Early Help Partnership in terms of progress and planning for the Family Hubs work. I see them as probably two distinct issues, but in the same area.
Another.
Yeah, I just thought I would really like to know a little bit more about the people who are actually on our safeguarding board. The actual who like, and what they do and what they bring to that board. I think that's really important, who they are, and perhaps we could invite some of them to come here and talk about, you know, because I think that safeguarding board is so important.
If we're thinking about timings, because that's quite a full, that's going to be too much for September. But I'm wondering if the recommendations that have come out of the national review of the deaths of those two children and the Plymouth Safeguarding Partnership and who's in it could be in the same meeting, but maybe not September, maybe it could be the one after, because I do think that the Josh McAllister, excuse me, Josh McAllister stuff is going to take up quite a chunk of the meeting. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I would say if we're going to do both of those reports, I think they will take up quite a bit of time. The partnership issue, I think, is a shorter issue. I think that's quite easily managed by a slide pack, a report from our business manager for the partnership. I don't think there's any difficulty with having all of those on. It will depend on how much time you want to devote to each. This is, I'll use the word, that our work in this space, because it's a huge space, will be iterative. So we'll be able to report on what we have done, what we are doing, what there is to do. And I think if Scrutiny are happy with that, so that we can think then about the challenge, about what is and what's coming, as well as think together about what the future holds, I think that would be really helpful to do that next time, so that we don't let too much time go by, actually.
So can you just read out, Jake, what we reckon we've got for
I was just going to say also, if you wanted them to have results in September as well, that is going to be quite a mammoth sort of session. So I don't know, as you were saying, if you want to start splitting one up and putting something in November as well, because I'm sure you'll probably want the results happening in September. Just a thought.
What have we got? What have we got for September?
So September, you've got the national reviews for Star and Arthur, and then the Josh McAllister in the recommendations.
Yeah.
So far.
So we want the finance report to come back. And then the safeguarding update, which will be fairly short. I don't know if we need to add some things to the work programme for scheduling at other times, because it struck me it might be good to have an update not just about our Ukrainian refugees, but any other families, you know, the Afghan resettlement programme, where we are with all of those projects. What else have I said here? National Tutoring. I think an update on the early help hubs, where that work is. I don't know whether that needs to be September or just to be put on the work programme to be looked at some point. And also I think it would be good to have an item about ILAC's readiness, where we are, where, you know, if it hasn't happened by then, but, you know, just a bit of an update, reassurance, whatever the right word is, around where we are on that. Again, that doesn't have to be a long item, does it? But I think if that could go on for September, I don't know what other people think, but I think, you know, as I say, it might have happened. And then
we're expecting a focused visit rather than a full ILACS inspection. So unless something changes, that's the order of things. So I think scheduling something to talk about the ILACS framework, I think that could be September or November. So we're not in danger of colliding with that, she said. But a focused visit could come, and I think that we've already prepared some slides that outline what a focused visit looks like in terms of an Ofsted visit. So we could actually share that between committees rather than waiting for the next committee to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
We sound like I'm very stupid. Obviously, I heard Ofsted, but ILACS, is that looked after children or
no? So it's the whole of children's social work. So it's an inspection of the local authority. So it is an inspection of local authority services. That's what the acronym stands for currently.
Apologies. Okay, I think that sounds like unless anyone's got any other additions, I think that sounds like...
This isn't an addition, but it's just a technical thing. If we are actually going to be looking seriously at the data of performance, particularly looking at performance of Key Stage 4, perhaps looking at performance of Key Stage 2, what does occur to me is our next meeting is on the 14th of September. What is the reality of all of that data actually being with the local authority at that particular time? Things like, obviously, the issue about inclusion and exclusions, that's an ongoing thing. But I don't know how quickly, especially as we're in a sort of negotiation with, they're no longer our local authority schools, we're in a sort of negotiation, and I know that Ming's done a lot of work to get them kind of on board. How realistic it is to actually get all that data to us by, well, it would have to be in advance of the 14th of September.
So I think what I'm suggesting is that we get some, perhaps we don't bring it to the meeting in September, but we share the information so that the session you have in November, so it may be that the information doesn't reach you till later on in September, but the idea being is you've had a pack of information, we've answered some of the questions that you've raised today, so that when we have that session, we can actually really have the session rather than us talk to you about the data. So I think if we work that way, it will mean that our September meeting, which sounds quite chunky anyway, can be really focused on that. But what I didn't want us to do is lose any time and that we get the most then out of the November session.
Yeah, I think that's sensible.
Thank you. And I do think I don't know what the position is, Jake, but whether we need to have the capacity of having a meeting that's, say, I don't know, half an hour longer than 2.5 hours, just so that people can have it in their diaries and don't have to leave or feel they're staying when they really want to leave. What do people think about that? 2.5 hours has always felt very short to me. It might be not very short, but just we do tend to go a little bit over because people do ask things.
Chair, are we sticking to 1:30 or 2?
Yeah.
Are we sticking to 1:30 or are we going back to 2 o'clock?
It is 1:30.
It is 1:30. I'm always going to be a little bit late because I have to finish it at my job. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think if we could put it in diaries till 4:30, if that's okay. I think that would be helpful. If we finish earlier, all to the good. I'll try and speed up my chairing. But so we've got September sorted-ish. Yeah, and we can have further conversation about that. But the basics are there. Thank you very much, everybody. I just wanted to say something very quickly about Alison Botham before we close, just to be minuted and marking the fact that she's retiring at the end of this week. She's got over 30 years' experience in delivering, managing and leading children's services, and she's finishing her career after 9 years with us in Plymouth. And anyone who knows her knows that her very raison d'etre, she lives and breathes her work, and she's absolutely passionate about improving the lives of children and young people in the city. And I want to say an enormous personal thanks to her for support that she gave me while I was getting to grips with this portfolio and ongoing in the past few years, and as Scrutiny Chair. And a huge thanks on behalf of the people of Plymouth and Plymouth City Council for always championing young people and putting them first. And she will be very much missed. And I hope she has a long and happy retirement. She really has earned it. And I'm very excited about welcoming Sharon and what you're going to do. And this is your third day? Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, huge welcome to you. But yeah, I really just wanted to say a huge thank you to Alison. And I'm sorry that she's not here to hear it for herself, but it will be minuted. And I hope the committee are happy me doing that on their behalf. And a huge thank you to everybody today. I know we have run over, but, you know, I think it's been really productive. It's quite a lot to get your head around when you don't, if you're new to the committee, but everybody's absolutely, you know, hit the ground running. And really thank you for your input and your questions and your enthusiasm today. Thank you ever so much. Thank you.